The funniest part, he cheated on a queen for a girl who was using him too. Everybody in this mess thought they were the smart one. Marcus thought he was upgrading, Victoria thought she was playing him. And Elena, she stayed quiet long enough for all of them to expose themselves. That's what makes this story hurt so much. It's not just revenge, it's humiliation with perfect timing. Because the real twist isn't that Marcus lost Elena, it's that he never knew who she was while he had her. He threw away the most powerful woman in the room, then had to watch her walk back in like she owned the city.
How does one even begin to calculate a failure of this magnitude? For Marcus Hale, the universe was about to deliver a lesson in the most brutal fashion. Some power plays don't just cost, they utterly decimate. For 7 years, he had shared a life with a woman he classified as simple, predictable, completely inconsequential. But on this night, surrounded by the city's true titans, he was forced to see the woman he discarded in her true form. She wasn't his shadow. She was gracing the arm of a man whose very name was a currency of infinite power, and the weight of his error crashed down on Marcus. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had abdicated an entire kingdom. Join us now for this magnificent collapse. Let's travel back to the moment the world fractured. A violent Thursday thunderstorm attacks the windows of a home on Maple Street, a street defined by its own anonymity. Inside, we find Alara Quinn performing the ritual of the perfect wife. The sound of her knife against the cutting board is the ticking clock on 7 years of her life. 7 entire years. She freezes, the blade suspended, an epoch spent preparing meals that grew cold long before his arrival. 7 years maintaining a house that never truly became a home. 7 years perfecting the art of being precisely what Marcus required. Silent, compliant, and fundamentally invisible. And then the front door flies open, and the entire performance is brought to a sudden, unceremonious end. Alara does not even flinch. She had become so adept at interpreting the atmosphere around Marcus that his arrivals were like meteorological events. The cadence of his stride, the impact of his briefcase, the oppressive silence that always followed. Tonight's entrance was a Category 5 storm of pure frustration. "You're home early," she observes, her tone devoid of inflection as her chopping continues. Marcus fills the doorway, wrestling with his tie as if to strangle it. At 34, his handsome features were made for advertising, impersonal and empty upon closer inspection. The suit was an expensive upgrade, a world away from their lean beginnings. Ambition had given him a polished veneer, but it had also suffocated what little soul he possessed. "We need to talk." He delivered the line like a chairman announcing downsizing. Alara finally sets the knife aside, turning to him and drying her hands on a cloth. "All right." She gazes at the man she once chose, the one she had architected her existence around. Even then, anticipating the blow, she could read the verdict in his eyes. It was the expression of a judge whose gavel has already fallen, rendering any defense she might offer utterly irrelevant. And still, a foolish, fragile spark of hope resisted being extinguished. "I'm leaving this weekend," Marcus declared. No prelude, no apology, only the final, fatal thrust. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." The words hung in the space between them, a cold epitaph for their union. Alara's posture remained unbroken. No gasp, no tears, no desperate plea for reconsideration. She simply stood there, absorbing this declaration just as she had absorbed 1,000 of his smaller cruelties, with a quiet, almost unsettling serenity. "It is our anniversary," she states, offering it as a simple point of data. To his credit, a brief flicker of discomfort crosses Marcus's face. but the guilt is gone in an instant. Yes, that's why I chose today. A clean severance. A clean severance? Alara repeats his phrase, testing its weight. Is someone else involved? That's not relevant to this discussion. So that is a yes, she counters, and his slight shrug is a confession more potent than any words. He wasn't even committed enough to construct a believable denial. Victoria Ashford, Alara says, and it is a statement, not an inquiry. Marcus's expression sharpens. How did you? I am your wife, Marcus, not your oblivious assistant. She folds the towel with a chilling surgical precision. You take your calls in another room. You return home wearing a perfume I do not own. At the company's Christmas party, you shadowed her every move like an obedient pet. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Would a conversation have altered a single outcome? The question lingered, an indictment to which they both already knew the answer was an emphatic no. The unvarnished truth was that Marcus had ceased valuing her perspective long before he sought the company of another woman. Victoria understands my world, Marcus said, his tone defensive. She is built for it. She's a strategic asset. And I suppose my strategic value has expired. Don't be so dramatic. But it is a cold calculation, is it not? You are simply executing an upgrade. His entire defense was a hollow piece of self-deception. The partners, the clients, they exist in a different stratosphere. Victoria's father holds this city's commercial real estate in his fist. Her family is the leverage I require. You are not. Alara's voice remained a frozen landscape, a calm, far more terrifying than any shouting could ever be. I'm just attempting to clarify the timeline. At what juncture did your performance review of my worth reveal I had become a liability? Marcus shifts his weight, visibly uncomfortable. This was not the scene he had rehearsed. He was prepared for tears, for rage, for desperate pleas. This quiet deconstruction of his character left him utterly exposed. It wasn't one thing, he finally articulated. It was just a gradual divergence. We want different things. We want different things, she echoes softly. Is that the official narrative you have prepared? What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry our partnership failed, but I'm not sorry that I'm advancing to a more profitable one. Profitable. The word was like venom on her tongue. And what role did I play in this venture? Was I the seed funding to be discarded the moment a superior investor appeared? You're twisting the narrative. Am I? For the first time, a sliver of steel entered her voice, not rage, but an icy, absolute clarity. You were nothing when we met, Marcus. A junior associate drowning in student debt, working 80-hour weeks for a firm that saw you only as a number. I was the one who gave you stability, who endured every slight, every passed-over promotion, every single humiliation. I made this house your sanctuary while you waged your petty corporate battles. And I appreciate that, but I am not suitable for the victor's circle, not well-connected enough, not wealthy enough. Alara's hands were now clasped before her. You aren't even going to attempt to offer me a more palatable lie, are you? Marcus's jaw went rigid. You want the unvarnished truth? Fine. Look at yourself, Alara. When was your last visit to a high-end salon? When did you last purchase something that wasn't from a clearance aisle? You are content with this? He gestured around the kitchen, the home. This small existence, am not. Small. The word was less than a whisper. I am making partner next year. Do you have any idea what that entails? The galas, the networking, the constant performance. I require a wife who is fluent in that language. Victoria can hold a room. She grasps the politics of attire, the subtle dance of conversation. She enhances my standing, you diminish it, you make me seem average. The cruelty in his words was likely more potent than he intended, but he made no move to retract it. I am not average, Alara. I was never destined for this life of scheduled tedium and budget holidays. I am exceptional. Alara absorbed this final judgment as she had all the others. In silence, with the frightening stillness he had always recognized but never bothered to comprehend. Even now, as he was incinerating her world, as her 7-year investment was being declared a complete loss, she refused to shatter. She was denying him the satisfaction of a predictable breakdown. When did you become this? She inquired, her voice soft. Become what? Someone who views people as instruments. Someone who believes a marriage is merely a corporate merger. Marcus retrieved his briefcase. You know, I did not come here for a psychoanalysis. I came to inform you that our agreement has concluded. My lawyer will be in contact. You can have the house. I will cover the mortgage until the sale is final. How remarkably generous. Don't be sarcastic. It is an unbecoming quality. He paused at the threshold, turning halfway. For what it's worth, you were a good wife, just not the appropriate one for the next phase of my career. And for what it's worth, Alara replied, you were never the man I believed you to be. Merely a renovation project I finally accept is a lost cause. A trace of something, perhaps guilt, perhaps recognition, crossed his features before he extinguished it. I will send movers for my belongings on Saturday. Do not make this any more difficult. Marcus, she called, and to his credit, he halted, expectant. Does Victoria know? Know what? About your methodology. That when her own utility begins to wane, when a more advantageous opportunity presents itself, you will liquidate her with the same ruthless efficiency you are demonstrating with me. His face became an impenetrable mask. That is the fundamental difference between you and her. She is not a depreciating asset. After his departure, Alara remained in the kitchen, perfectly still, listening to the downpour and the new, cavernous silence of the house. The components for a life she no longer inhabited sat abandoned on the counter. The water she had set to boil had long since gone cold, and in that moment, the entire room is suspended in time, like a frozen frame in a tragic play after the final, devastating reveal. She moves into the living room, a study in composure, and settles onto the very couch they had argued over 5 years ago. He had wanted leather, she preferred fabric, a small skirmish from a time before he grew weary of even the pretense of compromise. One can almost read the stage directions. Here, she is meant to break. The emotional climax, her husband has just audited their life together and she has failed, reducing 7 years to a footnote. A lesser woman would be shattering porcelain. But Alara, she remains unnervingly still. In the afternoon glow, she seemed like a masterpiece on the verge of ruin. A wildness, buried for ages, was a live wire in her palms. After 7 years of playing the suburban wife, her true self was stirring. The phone's blank face on the table was a void calling to her. A long moment passed before her hand shot out. Her thumb slid over the glass, bypassing the cast of her current charade, the neighbors, the book club members, an entire roster of hollow connections. She swiped through the noise deep into a 7-year-old list of contacts and stopped at a single letter. V. A faint tremor in her thumb was the last barrier before she incinerated her world. She could still perform the role Marcus had assigned her, the simple divorce, the easy settlement, the dull life he presumed she desired. She could continue being Quinn, a forgettable phantom. Or she could give a new directive. Rain began to beat against the windows, a frenzied tempo for a past she'd tried to enter. For 7 years, she had been a ghost, moving with caution. For 7 years, she'd feigned amnesia about the life before Marcus Hale. For 7 years, she had been an elaborate lie. She recalled the look he gave her earlier. It wasn't hate. She could have withstood hate. It was utter dismissal, the look reserved for a finished object, a file marked for deletion. She was nothing. Her finger pressed the screen. The line rang once, twice. On the third, a voice answered, deep and accented as if no time had elapsed. "Ara," he said, a statement of fact, not a question. He always had that chilling certainty that could pierce any silence or distance. "I wondered when you would make this call." "Victor," she answered, her voice a calm facade over a raging inferno, "I have to come home." A dense silence hung between them. "You never left, Princessa? You only forgot where you were." "I remember now." "Good." The smirk in his voice was a palpable thing, sharp and perceptive. "I am sending a vehicle. 1 hour. Victor, don't let him know. Not yet. Not until I'm there." "Let who know?" She closed her eyes. "Roman." That name filled the space, heavy enough to crush a man like Marcus Hale. Roman Vulov, her husband, her first and only, the man she abandoned 7 years ago. She'd traded an empire of fear and respect for a crumb of affection. "What a travesty." "As you wish," Victor said. "But Ara, he never signed the papers." Her eyes shot open. "What?" "The divorce articles from 7 years ago. He refused to sign them. In the eyes of the state, and every other way that counts, you remain his wife." The truth struck her with the force of a physical blow. She believed she had made a clean excision, surgically severing her past. But Roman Vulov never surrenders what is his. Never. 1 hour, she repeated, her voice now forged from steel. "The vehicle will be there. Welcome home, Mrs. Vulov." The connection broke. Elena, sitting in the gloom, held the phone to her ear as a small, sharp smile formed. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the expression of an actress who, after a long performance, nearly forgot she was playing a part. It was the smile of someone recalling their true name. Mrs. Vulov, never Mrs. Hale. She rose and moved to the bedroom they had occupied. His closet was already half bare. She saw now that Marcus had been relocating his existence for weeks, bit by bit, to Victoria's apartment. Behind her own unassuming clothes was a small, locked safe he'd never thought to question, assuming it held trinkets. He was almost right. She entered the combination her actual birthday, not the forgery on her license, and the steel door swung open. Inside lay a passport, an ID, a credit card, and a phone, all bearing her real name. Elena Vulov. Not Quinn. Elena. The name felt foreign, yet like a true reflection. Beneath the documents lay a single photograph, its edges softened by countless touches. She lifted it. It showed a younger her, beside a man who dominated the frame by his mere presence. Roman Vulov, tall, dark, with eyes that swallowed light and offered none in return. His hand rested on her waist with a casual possessiveness that spoke a single word. Mine. She was 21 in the photo, he was 32. She had been a gifted student, clever enough to be of use to him, and foolish enough to believe she could exist in his orbit without being consumed. He was the center of any room he entered, managing global enterprises, shifting millions of dollars, and extinguishing lives with the same cold, clinical detachment. Their first encounter was at some university function she was obliged to attend. A scholarship girl in a loaned dress, she was an anomaly among Manhattan's elite. He was there for his usual purposes, moving like a predator through the polite assembly, securing deals and reminding everyone of the underworld he commanded. "You seem out of place," were his first words to her. "So do you," she had retorted, too weary for courtesy. And he had actually laughed. A rare, genuine laugh. Roman Vulop was a man seldom surprised. Their wedding took place 3 months later. 6 months after that, she began to grasp the nature of the monster she had bound herself to. A year into their marriage, she comprehended the cost of his power, the perpetual shadow of peril, the blood that stained you simply by proximity. 2 years in, she fled, not from Roman. He was never cruel, never touched her violently. In private, he treated her as his most trusted confidant while displaying her to the world. She ran from the role of his wife, its crushing burden, the violence endemic to his soul. She convinced herself she craved a simple, normal existence. She chose Marcus as the perfect antithesis to Roman, predictable, with modest, easily understood ambitions. A man who sought success without power, money without dominion, a man she could control, a man who would never dare to look behind her mask. The entire charade had been pathetic. Elena returned the photo and secured the safe. She packed with chilling efficiency, taking only essentials. Not his gifts, not the wardrobe he provided, but the items from the safe and a single object from her nightstand. It was a simple silver bracelet, a wedding present from Roman. As she fastened it, headlights cut through the bedroom's darkness. 1 hour. Victor was a man of his word. The transport outside was not merely a car. It was a statement of intent. Black, sleek, with windows so dark they resembled obsidian. The kind of vehicle that made neighbors glance once, then decide they had seen nothing. A man stood by the open rear door, younger than Victor, possessing the unsettling stillness of Roman's men. Trained, lethal, loyal. Elena walked out of the house on Maple Street without a backward look, carrying a single bag. The downpour had ceased, leaving the night air sharp and the street gleaming under the lamps. The man held her door in silence. As she entered, it shut with the heavy, definitive thud of a bank vault. The interior smelled of fine leather and gun oil, a scent that struck her like a lost memory. Victor was seated opposite her, looking older than she recalled, yet radiating the same dangerous aura that marked him as Roman's most trusted soldier. "You appear well," he said in Russian. It had always been their private tongue, a barrier against outsiders like Marcus. "You haven't aged a day," she replied in Russian, a courteous falsehood. His eyes studied her face. "Are you certain?" Once this is set in motion, Marcus Hale will finally grasp what he has lost. More than that, he will grasp his error. There will be no retreat. "I am certain," he paused. "He has wronged you." It wasn't a question, but she responded. "He discarded me, as if I were meaningless, as if 7 years of my life were a minor inconvenience he had finally resolved." Victor's expression remained impassive, but a flash of pure ice ignited in his eyes. "And he is about to receive a lesson on the meaning of nothing. His career, his reputation, his future with that Ashford woman. We will burn it to the ground." "No." Elena's response was soft but absolute. Not right away. I must see Roman first. He will expect. I am fully aware of what he expects. But the decision is mine, Victor. This is my play. Roman taught me that control is everything, and I will be the one who determines when and where to exert it. A faint smile touched Victor's mouth. So, you haven't forgotten. Good. We were concerned 7 years may have diluted your resolve. I was never weak, I was dormant, and my time in the shadows is over. The sedan sliced through the city for 40 minutes. Elena observed as suburbia bled into the urban core, picket fences yielding to steel towers. The car bypassed all of Roman's public ventures, the restaurants and clubs serving as legitimate fronts. It navigated toward a tower in lower Manhattan, a structure that appeared like any other opulent high-rise. But Elena knew its secrets, its formidable security, and the fortress it contained for the man in the penthouse. This was Roman's true throne room, where all pretense was shed. Reaching the elevator was a 3-stage ordeal, including a biometric check before it ascended directly to the summit. Victor exited first, a conditioned reflex from years as Roman's shadow then motioned for Elena to precede him. The apartment was a perfect, undisturbed sanctuary. Its immense glass walls framed the entire city in a breathtaking panorama. The furnishings, valued beyond any luxury vehicle, were statements of power, not comfort, complemented by masterpieces museums would vie for. At its very heart, with his back turned, Roman Vulov presided over New York's glowing tapestry. He let the silence hang, a practiced maneuver to command the atmosphere and heighten the pressure. When he finally pivoted, Elena felt her own breath abandon her. After 7 years of steeling herself for this moment, he seemed older, a change that had chiseled him into someone even more formidable, not diminished. Fine new lines were scored around his eyes. Hints of silver now ghosted through the hair at his temples. He was dressed in a suit that cost an easy $10,000, fitting him with a perfection that made it seem a part of him. His eyes met hers, and for a single infinite second, the world fell silent. Then a smile traced Roman's lips, the look of a man who had waited 7 years for a victory he knew was already his. Hello, Elena. Her birth name, not Alara, spoken with a tone that was both a sanctuary and a cage. Hello, Roman. Victor retreated into the lift, abandoning them as the polished doors slid shut. I heard about your husband, Roman stated, moving toward a bar to pour 2 measures of vodka. The liquor was a rare spirit, impossible to procure. Your ex-husband, I should say, though you were never legally his. Marriage suggests a freedom you were never afforded. You forgot to sign the papers. They were never delivered to me. He extended a glass to her, his fingers deliberately grazing hers. It was an intentional, measured contact. They were sent back. Your lawyer should have informed you. Oh, she did. I just presumed you'd rejected them. I did. But only after guaranteeing you would never know. It was essential that you believed you were free. He lifted his glass. To freedom, then, and the moment you discover it is only an illusion. They both drank the contents in one motion. The vodka's burn was a familiar fire in her throat. Why? She asked, her voice tight. Why allow me to think I was divorced? Because the escape needed to feel authentic. You had to believe that your new life was a genuine achievement. Roman placed his glass down, his gaze a velvet trap. Had I compelled you to remain, you would have grown to despise me. I needed you to return of your own accord, with a full understanding of where you truly belong. That's nothing but manipulation? It is. The alternative was the truth, which would have squandered 7 years of extremely costly patience. So no. He eliminated the distance between them, his cologne so potent she could at last discern the true color of his eyes. They were not black, she now recalled, but the most profound shade of brown she had ever seen. I was always certain you would return, Elena. I knew that given enough time, you would remember your own nature. The only variable was when. You sound incredibly sure of yourself. My confidence is born from knowing you more deeply than Marcus Hale ever could, and at times more than you know yourself. His hand rose, his fingers tracing the contour of her jaw with a tenderness that felt utterly alien to him. You attempted to live an ordinary life. You gave it a sincere effort, but that part was never meant for a star of your magnitude. Elena closed her eyes, resisting the magnetic force he had always held over her. He claimed I was holding him back, that I was insufficient for his new world. Roman's hand froze. When her eyes flew open, his expression was a mask of glacial rage. He said that and more. Victor told me he caused you pain. I was not aware he was also foolish enough to disrespect you. What is the distinction? It's done. I walked away. It makes all the difference. Roman's voice was a deep rumble, more terrifying than any shout. Because no one speaks to my wife in that manner. No one assigns a value to what is mine. No one. He took a slight step back, his formidable self-control reasserting itself. Makes you feel less than who you are. I'm not yours any longer, Roman. I made the choice to leave. And yet you stand here in my residence, wearing my jewelry and drinking my vodka. His smile was as sharp as a blade. You can deceive yourself, Princessa, but you cannot deceive me. You are here because you have finally accepted the truth. And what truth might that be? That you were never designed for small men with small ambitions, that a simple existence, a simple affection, and simple aspirations do not suit you, they never have. He strolled to the window, looking out at the metropolis that lay before him like a personal dominion. This is your world with me. This has always been your reality. Elena moved to his side, near enough to sense the warmth of his body without making contact. Far below, millions of souls hurried by, each pursuing their own modest dreams. She had fought with all her might to be one of them. So what is the strategy? She inquired. That is entirely contingent on your desires. She pictured Marcus's face, likely beside Victoria, celebrating his liberation from a union he considered a liability. She recalled the way he looked at her, as if she were a problem finally resolved. She reflected on 7 years spent diminishing herself, becoming quieter, smaller, less. I want him to understand, she said at last. I want Marcus Hale to look upon me and realize precisely what he cast aside. Vengeance, then? A lesson. She turned to Roman. I want him to learn the cost of underestimating someone, of treating them as if they are disposable. Roman's smile widened, filled with a predator's satisfaction. That is something that can be arranged. But I must warn you, there is no returning from this path. Marcus Hale's existence as he knows it will be methodically dismantled. His social standing, his professional life, his future with that Ashford woman. It will all be reduced to ashes, and everyone will understand why. Everyone will know he was married to Elena Volkov and was too blind to comprehend what that signified. Good. Are you certain? This ceases to be about him. This becomes about you reclaiming your crown, your rightful position with me, as my wife, my partner, my equal. No more fleeing, no more hiding. Elena gazed at her own image in the glass, a phantom hovering above the city's lights. For 7 years, that face had been Alara Quinn, gentle, quiet, forgettable. But standing in this place, in Roman's private domain, with his token and his liquor, she recognized another. She saw Elena Volkov, the woman she was, the woman she tried to extinguish, the woman who was always waiting just beneath the surface. I am certain, she affirmed. Roman's hand enveloped hers, their fingers intertwining with a practiced, familiar intimacy. In that case, welcome home, my love. It is time we reintroduced you to the world. Outside, the rain began to fall once more, but within, Elena felt a heat she had not known for 7 years. It was not the tepid, feeble warmth of her life with Marcus, a flame that could never quite banish the chill. This was something entirely different. This was the blaze of a wildfire building its power, poised to incinerate everything. Marcus Hale had made a grave, life-altering error. He had discarded a woman he perceived as fragile, unremarkable, and benign. In truth, he had just betrayed the wife of New York's most formidable man. He was about to be educated on the difference. The first morning of her reborn life felt like awakening inside a body she had forgotten. Elena stood in the penthouse lavatory, observing her reflection with a cold, unforgiving gaze. The same face, the same form, the same woman who had been dicing vegetables in a mundane kitchen just 24 hours prior. And yet, a profound transformation had occurred, like a dislocated bone snapping perfectly back into place. Roman materialized in the doorway behind her, clad in a charcoal suit that cost more than Marcus's monthly earnings. He met her eyes in the mirror. "You did not sleep," he noted. "Neither did you." "I rarely do." He approached, adjusting his cufflinks with expert ease. "Victor is prepared. Certain actions must be taken immediately. You wanted Marcus to comprehend his loss. That requires us to prepare the stage." Roman's hand came to rest on her shoulder, its warmth seeping through the silk robe she had borrowed. "Unless you are having reservations." Elena saw a flash of Marcus presenting her with divorce papers on their anniversary and heard the casual cruelty in his tone when he labeled her ordinary. She had incinerated 7 years of her life in an attempt to be his ideal wife. "My decision is final." "Good. Prepare yourself. We have a full agenda." An hour later, Elena was in what Roman called his office, which was in reality a command center of glass and flowing data. 3 walls provided a staggering view of Manhattan. The 4th was a bank of monitors, glowing with intelligence she was only now beginning to process. Victor stood near a screen, tablet in hand, like a cleric about to deliver a eulogy for a man who was not yet dead. "Marcus Anthony Hale," Victor began, his accent precise and lethal. "Age 34, senior associate at Whitmore and Chen, on track for partnership in 6 months. He holds a bachelor's from Cornell and a law degree from Columbia. The subject is presently located at 2847 Park Avenue, Suite 14C. Victoria's residence," Elena registered. A faint smile touched Victor's lips. "That is correct. He took up residence there 3 weeks ago, while still legally bound to you." Roman settled deeper into his chair, his fingers forming a steeple beneath his chin like a magistrate about to deliver a verdict. "Continue." "His net worth is a paltry $340,000, primarily in retirement accounts with Ashford Financial Group. He leases a BMW, maintains an image with suits he cannot afford, and operates at a 30% deficit simply to sustain the facade." Victor switched to another display. His promotion to partner is wholly contingent upon securing the Ashford family as a permanent client. Victoria's father, Richard Ashford, presides over a commercial real estate empire estimated at around $800 million. So it was never about them, Elena understood, her voice utterly empty. He's simply using her for access to her father's empire. Precisely. A partnership in that firm is not earned by merit. It is purchased by securing a client of that magnitude. Marcus has been maneuvering to become lead counsel for the Ashford family's East Coast operations. Roman's face was an unreadable mask, but Elena could perceive the cold calculus within, a grandmaster arranging his pieces. And what role does Victoria play in this little production? Elena inquired. Victor projected another file onto the large display. On the screen, an image glowed. A woman in her late 20s, her features sculpted with an unnerving perfection. The blonde hair, the impossible angles of her face, the perfect smile. It all radiated the kind of self-assurance born from a life without refusal. This was Victoria Ashford, a specimen bred in gilded confines, viewing the world as her private amusement. 28 years old, a Wharton MBA, and vice president of acquisitions at Ashford Financial, a role crafted just for her. Victor's voice was devoid of emotion, yet Elena could feel the chilling verdict beneath it. She has intelligence, yes, but her self-perception is dangerously inflated, a flaw her father nurtures. Her mother drinks. The brother. Elena cut him off. Wait, there's a brother? Christopher Ashford, age 32. He's the true heir to the family dynasty, managing West Coast operations from San Francisco. Our sources confirm he is the capable one. Victoria, by contrast, is the prize they display at galas and corporate functions. For Elena, the pieces locked together, exposing the sad, hollow structure of their lives. Victoria's need for Marcus was just as desperate as his for her. She craves legitimacy. A partner with his own standing elevates her beyond mere ornamentation. Excellent, Roman observed. Your instinct for the dynamics of power has always been keen. I learned from the master. Elena's attention returned to Victor. Is there more? Marcus maintains a pristine public facade. No formal divorce proceedings have been initiated. All traces of Victoria are gone from his online presence. He's avoiding any action that might tarnish his carefully crafted reputation. He is simply biding his time, waiting for the dust to settle post-divorce so he can avoid appearing opportunistic. So clinical. However, his attorney submitted the initial filing yesterday, an amicable dissolution, citing insoluble issues. He's offering the apartment as discussed and a sum of $50,000. It was an insult, delivered with cold precision. The value he placed on 7 years of her existence was less than the price of his vehicle. A nerve twitched in Roman's jaw. Such a magnanimous proposal. I have no interest in his money, Elena stated, her tone empty. I know you don't. You have your own. With a flick of his wrist, Victor projected another document onto the display. The figures on it stole Elena's breath. The fund I established for you 7 years past has appreciated consistently. Its present worth is roughly $12 million, secured in investments that yield about $400,000 annually. Elena could only gaze at the monitor. I never knew. You never inquired, but I would not permit you to be vulnerable, Elena. Whatever passed between us, you were my wife. That meant you were my charge. Roman's voice had lost some of its edge. Always his property. That sense of ownership once felt like a cage. 7 years ago, she was merely another exquisite object in his collection. But now, faced with proof of his unseen guardianship, the sensation was altered. It was not appreciation, but something far more complex. "So what is the strategy?" she inquired, suppressing the strange emotion. Roman and Victor exchanged a glance that was achingly familiar. A plan was already in place, awaiting her command. "We are going to take him apart," Roman declared, his voice a quiet, chilling storm. "It will be a methodical dismantling, stage by stage, disguised as misfortune and his own poor judgment, never as a targeted assault. We begin with his profession, then his social standing, and we conclude with his prospects. By the end, Marcus Hale will grasp, with absolute certainty, the true worth of what he possessed and discarded. That seems like it will be a lengthy process. Several weeks. Victor has already initiated the opening stage." Elena looked to Victor, who offered a brief, clinical acknowledgement. "You were certain I would want this, weren't you?" "I was certain you would require that he be set right," Victor corrected. "Vengeance is disordered. This is merely a course correction. Marcus Hale was acting on flawed intelligence. We are providing him with the full set of facts." A faint smile touched Elena's lips at the turn of phrase. It was Victor's unique gift, framing utter annihilation as an educational experience. "Let me see the strategy," she commanded. Roman stood, approaching the windows with the fluid, deadly elegance of a hunter. Whitmore and Chen is a mid-level firm with outsized ambitions. Their goal is to enter New York's top 20. Marcus's path to partner depends on his billable hours and his capacity for client acquisition. He is adequate at the former and has staked his entire career on the latter. The Ashford account. Exactly. An account far more delicate than he knows. Richard Ashford is a vestige of a bygone era, old wealth struggling in a modern world. He is over-leveraged, his judgment is poor, and he keeps his sinking ventures afloat with imaginative bookkeeping. The company is valued at $800 million on paper, but its real liquidity is a sliver of that. Victor displayed financial data that was far from public. Ashford Financial is perhaps 18 months away from complete collapse. They are exposed on numerous properties, trapped in long-term developments and hemorrhaging capital from half-occupied buildings. Where did this intelligence come from? Roman's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Because I am the owner of the land for 3 of those developments. I have observed Richard Ashford's slow-motion demolition for months, anticipating the moment his desperation would lead to a terminal error. Now we simply accelerate the clock, exploit the vulnerabilities, and reveal his liabilities to certain parties." Roman came back to his seat, resting against the desk. "Richard Ashford will soon require a rescuer. I intend to present myself as that rescuer, but my conditions will exclude his daughter's suitor from his legal counsel." Elena absorbed the cold, brilliant architecture of the plan. "You intend to rescue his firm. I intend to purchase a controlling interest in it, sufficient to place my own operatives on his board, sufficient to dictate their choice of legal representation." Roman's gaze met hers. "And our updated corporate policy will have no place for the firm of Whitmore and Chen. An action that obliterates Marcus's ambitions of partnership. That is the objective. And the approach for Victoria?" Victor fielded the inquiry. "Victoria is an issue that resolves itself. Once Marcus loses his utility as the family's counsel, his status plummets to a competent lawyer seeing the chairman's daughter. Richard Ashford tolerates him because he serves a purpose. Remove that purpose, and he becomes another parasite on her allowance. Precisely. Richard Ashford is a man of tradition. He anticipates his daughter will unite with wealth and influence, ideally from within his own sphere. So in Roman's eyes, this Marcus Hale was an upstart. But in truth, he was an unpredictable asset, a disposable instrument. Roman's projection was simple: render Marcus irrelevant, and Richard's paternal protections would activate. He would investigate Marcus's background, his true intentions, and compare him to Victoria's other wealthy prospects. And Victoria, Elena questioned, does she have any real feeling for him, or is he simply another piece on her board? Victor merely activated his tablet, displaying their private messages. The raw data, he offered. Elena moved nearer, her eyes scanning the exchange between Victoria and her confidant, Jennifer. The message was sent 2 days prior, just as Marcus served Elena the divorce filing. Jennifer inquires, how is that domestic situation of his proceeding? Victoria's answer is chillingly detached. It is under control. Marcus is less complicated than I anticipated. I believe he's appreciative. Jennifer texts back. Appreciative is a plus. LOL. Beats another spoiled heir. Victoria concurs, noting his gratitude for small gestures as a welcome departure from the privileged sons her father prefers. Jennifer counters, you are absolutely developing feelings. Victoria's reply, I am invested in the narrative of the self-made man. It reflects well on me, makes me appear less superficial. He is also attractive and performs well socially. Jennifer's simple response, so much romance. As if. Victoria ends the conversation abruptly. Do not be absurd. I deal in strategy, not romance. Marcus was a pawn in her 5-year strategy, entirely expendable. Her disposition was colder than ice. Her whole calculus hinged on his success or failure. If he prevails, he might be retained. If he falters, he is gone, succeeded by others already waiting in reserve. Elena understood then. Their bond was a transaction devoid of all emotion. Two predators in a slow orbit, each convinced of their own dominance. She is like I was, Elena murmured. Roman readily conceded. Which means the separation will be neat. With no sentiment invested, it is merely a contract. Remove the financial incentive and the entire structure collapses. Then what is our next action? Elena asked. Victor began the first phase yesterday. Today we accelerate, Roman said, his gaze falling to a Patek Philippe, a timepiece worth more than a luxury car. In approximately 2 hours, I have a meeting with Richard Ashford. He is completely unaware that I am about to initiate a hostile acquisition of his whole enterprise. He will have no option but to capitulate. The man is insolvent, and my proposal is his only means of salvation. He will need to sacrifice his dignity to endure. Victor's screen went black. While Roman is engaged in that, our task is different, and that is to reintroduce Elena Volkov to the elite circle she abandoned. Your 7-year absence has erased you from their memory. The thought landed like a jolt of electricity. It was time to return. For 7 years, she had vanished into a quiet life, a specter named Quinn, the unassuming wife of Marcus Hale. It was the perfect cover, but to become Elena Volkov once more was to embrace the tempest, the risk, the influence, the suffocating pressure. I am not prepared for this, she confessed. Roman rose, moved from behind his desk, and knelt directly before her. This act of lowering himself was a strategic strike that pierced her armor more effectively than any command ever had. "You were always prepared," he murmured, his voice a low vibration as he enclosed her hands in his. "You had it when we first found each other. You had it when you walked away. It was always there, dormant. We are simply waking it." "And chances I fail?" "None." "You can't be certain of that." "My certainty comes from knowing you. I watched you suppress a brilliant mind for 7 years, a discipline that only made you keener. Marcus Hale attempted to shatter you, yet here you are." His hands tightened almost imperceptibly. "You are not the same person who made that pact with me, Elena. You are more. You are harder. And now you possess a cold fury that makes you truly formidable." "I have no desire to be a monster." "I am aware, and that is precisely why this will work." He stood, bringing her to her feet with him. "Victor is correct. We have preparations to make, beginning with your appearance." "What is flawed about my appearance?" Roman and Victor exchanged a glance that might have been amusing in a less grave moment. "The Quinn aesthetic was built for invisibility," Victor stated with careful diplomacy. "The Elena Volkov persona demands an entirely new visual signature." 3 hours on, Elena understood his meaning completely. The establishment Victor led her to was a clandestine elite boutique for clients who never glanced at price tags. Its proprietor, a commanding woman named Anastasia, assessed Elena in a moment and began selecting garments with surgical precision. "No," Anastasia declared, her tone absolute ice as Elena's hand drifted toward a plain navy dress from her old life. "That is for women who wish to remain unseen. Your time in the shadows is concluded." She presented an emerald silk gown that cost more than Elena's former annual salary. It fit like a second skin, outlining her form with subtle grace. The dress communicated authority without arrogance, sensuality without vulnerability. "An improvement," Anastasia conceded. "Now you look like someone of consequence." For the following 2 hours, they constructed what Anastasia termed a foundational wardrobe. Gowns, suits, and separates in hues that made Elena's features ignite. The garments were tailored to accentuate her physique. The materials conveyed wealth, not opulence. This was not an exercise in making her beautiful. It was about forging psychological armor. From a chair in the corner, Victor observed the entire metamorphosis, offering subtle nods of assent. When Anastasia finally declared them finished, he rose and presented her with an unmarked black credit card, saying nothing. "Have everything delivered to the penthouse," he instructed. "And, Anastasia, your usual discretion is expected." "But of course, Victor Mikhailovich. It is always a privilege to outfit a woman of influence." In the vehicle, Elena watched Victor's silhouette against the glass. "How long have you had this contingency in place?" "Which one?" "Do not feign ignorance with me." "That boutique, ready and waiting, the owner knowing my measurements without being told, the pieces fitting perfectly from the start. This was all prearranged, wasn't it?" Victor allowed himself a fleeting, uncommon smile. "Roman and I prepare for numerous possibilities. This was merely one of them." "You genuinely believed I would return." "We remained hopeful," he amended. "There is a distinction." He faced her, his expression turning serious. "Elena, you must comprehend this. These 7 years were a trial for Roman as well. He is a man of no patience. The self-restraint he exercised in waiting was immense. But he never surrendered. He never found a replacement. He never lost faith that you would eventually reactivate. That seems an insane level of trust in someone who abandoned him." No, Victor corrected softly. It shows he completely understood your reasons for leaving, and he knew what was required to bring you back. You fled out of fear of what this world would turn you into. You are returning because you realize that escaping power does not grant you safety. It only makes you a more prominent target. That is evolution. Roman recognizes it. Elena simply watched the cityscape stream past. What if I am incapable of this? What if I am not the person you both imagine me to be? Then you will fail and we will adapt. But you will not fail, Elena. I have had you under observation for 7 years. Yes, we watched. You never lost your intellect, your strategic mind, or your ability to perceive what others miss. You were simply directing that talent toward being invisible rather than being influential. Now you are merely redirecting your aim. The car slowed before a modern, gleaming skyscraper patrolled by guards in full tactical attire. Where are we? Your new base of operations, one of them. Roman understood you would require your own domain, independent of his. A place from which you could manage your own affairs without feeling like his subordinate. Victor escorted her past security personnel who were clearly anticipating her arrival, and into a private lift that performed a retinal scan. The suite on the 32nd floor presented a view of Central Park, a space where every detail was the pinnacle of quality. Run what? Elena whispered, her fingers grazing a desk that was worth more than her previous car. So Roman laid it bare for her. Choose your arena, Elena. His domain was so vast he knew a mind like hers could conquer any sector. Victor gave her a tablet filled with enterprises prime for acquisition, real estate titans, legitimate investment houses, even charitable organizations in need of leadership. It was a simple offer. Select your battleground or create a new one. It is time to build your own center of power. A year prior, this flood of information would have overwhelmed her. Now she saw only vulnerabilities, tactical openings, and the very architecture of the game. This one, she stated, her finger tapping the file for the Meridian Arts Foundation. Victor looked perplexed. That entity. It was a struggling nonprofit for young artists, insolvent and hemorrhaging funds. Its purpose was noble, but its execution was a catastrophe. Roman had acquired it 6 months ago merely to prevent its total collapse, but had yet to decide its fate. I will take it, she declared. Victor's eyebrow shot up. He explained it was a quagmire of embezzled money, disorganized programs, and a board concerned only with tax benefits. Resurrecting it would be an absolute nightmare. Perfect, she replied. I require a purpose beyond simple avarice, influence, or vengeance. She set the tablet aside. If I am re-entering this world, I will operate under my own principles. That means wielding my power for something greater than the ruin of Marcus Hale. And for the first time, Victor appeared genuinely astonished. She understood Roman would consent. He had always maintained that power without purpose was just cruel wealth. Prepare the documents, she instructed Victor. I want absolute authority over the foundation, complete control. I intend to dismantle it, redefine its mission, and transform it into something meaningful. Consider it done, Victor affirmed. The transfer of ownership would be completed by morning. He glanced at his phone. Roman's meeting with Ashford was likely concluding. We should return. He will expect a full debriefing. The journey back to the penthouse felt different. Elena no longer viewed the city as a sanctuary for hiding, but as a territory she was poised to claim. The entire city, Every tower was founded on Roman's influence, and now it was a mirror of her own. He was in his customary chair, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking as if he already knew she had succeeded. She sat opposite him and delivered the facts. I am Richard Ashford's new partner. I have acquired 40% of his company for $320 million, which gives me control of his legal and financial departments. Roman's smile was a thing of pure, lethal contentment. His approval was a palpable presence. They had not yet even uttered Marcus's name. When Richard lauded his performance, she continued, I feigned indifference and planted the notion that larger ventures require more significant players. I put forward the names of several elite firms with far more influence. Roman simply rotated the ice in his glass, absorbing it all. Then I named 3 of their rivals, each more formidable than Whitmore and Chen. Ashford's entire demeanor had changed in an instant. The implication that Marcus was no longer relevant was a tactical masterstroke. Richard was already questioning his allegiance. She could see him calculating the new reality, understanding Marcus was now a risk and her substantial investment required a different caliber of counsel. Marcus was about to be terminated, likely within weeks. It would be swift, civil, and utterly irreversible. Nearby, Victor was already immersed in his tablet. I'm seeding anonymous worries within the Whitmore and Chen partnership, he murmured, detailing a campaign of whispers about Marcus's client acquisitions and the frailty of the Ashford account. An internal audit would follow, a ghost war on territory Marcus believed was still his. Elena observed the 2 of them, a flawless engine of destruction, Roman and Victor bound by the lethal cadence of an old vow. This was the precise power she had fled, not just Roman, but the entire web he controlled. A part of her recoiled, yet another felt the unsettling comfort of coming home. So, when does he finally know it's over? She asked. There was no way to be certain. Perhaps next week, when Richard's calls went unanswered or his appointments began to evaporate. Sooner, if he was sharp enough to sense the atmospheric pressure of his career plummeting. Roman set his glass down. The moment he'll truly understand, he said, is when he lays eyes on you again and everything falls into place. And where will that happen? The Garrison Charity Gala in 3 weeks. The city's elite would be there, including the Ashfords and Marcus, likely still chasing the specter of that connection. Roman's gaze was a physical weight. And so will we, as Mr. and Mrs. Vulov seen together for the first time in 7 years. And there it was. The thought was a current of electricity through her veins. 3 weeks to forge an entirely new woman, a persona capable of commanding that space. 3 weeks to methodically bury Ara Quinn and resurrect Elena Vulov with such perfection that no one would ever sense the artifice. This will require more than a new wardrobe, she breathed. I'm aware, Roman replied, which is why you have 3 weeks. He rose, offering his hand. We begin with dinner. The real work starts at sunrise. Victor has already assembled the artisans, legal minds, PR strategists, and security experts who construct modern legends. You'll be prepared. Elena accepted his hand, allowing him to draw her to her feet. And if I'm not, we'll adapt. It's our way. Roman's thumb drew slow circles on her skin. But you will be, Elena. You're no longer facing this alone. That evening, long after the meal and the plans were put away, Elena lingered in the bathroom, her mind fixed on Marcus. She saw him, probably celebrating his newfound freedom at Victoria's, certain he'd executed the perfect scheme. He was utterly unaware of the Category 5 tempest gathering just beyond his world. He couldn't see that the life he was crafting was already being unmade by the quiet woman he'd discarded, a woman now orchestrating his ruin with a precision he could never fathom. Roman's reflection materialized behind her in the mirror. "Your thoughts are a roar." "I was wondering if it's too much," she confessed. "Is that a genuine question, or are you feeling for an escape route?" Elena met his gaze in the glass. "Perhaps a bit of both." "Then allow me to be perfectly clear," he stated. "What we're doing to Marcus Hale is surgical, it is proportional, and it is far less than he earned for what he did to you. We aren't destroying his life, merely taking down the ill-gotten advantage he wielded. He will recover. He just won't profit from your suffering." Roman's hands came to rest on her shoulders. "If you want this to end, it ends. But do not confuse my empathy for weakness, Elena." Marcus revealed his true nature to you. "We are simply ensuring the world gets the same view." She pivoted to face him, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. "This skin doesn't yet feel like my own." "I know," he said softly, "but it will." He placed a kiss on her forehead, an act of shocking tenderness from such a man. "Come to bed. Tomorrow we begin shaping you into a weapon. Tonight is for peace." But sleep remained a distant shore. Elena lay awake as Roman's breathing deepened, gazing into the shadows, contemplating the woman she had been, the one she had feigned, and the one she was becoming. None of them felt complete. None felt true. And perhaps that was the heart of it. She was never meant to be a single, solid thing. Not Ara, not Elena, not the quiet wife or the avenging queen. It seemed her truest self existed in the space between them, where affection and influence, frailty and force performed a ceaseless, intricate ballet. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "The divorce papers are scheduled for filing tomorrow. Please confirm receipt of the settlement terms. J. Morrison, Esquire." It was Marcus's lawyer, a functionary following protocol, keeping the ledgers clean. Elena erased the message without a second thought. Let them wait. Let Marcus feel that initial chilling touch of doubt, the first hint that this story's ending would not be his to write. The contest had begun, and this time Elena was fluent in its rules. The following 2 weeks became an immersion in strategic chaos, a recollection of all she had fled from and, strangely, all she had longed for. The change was not sudden. It was assembled fragment by fragment through subtle adjustments and grand gestures, through mastering how to move as if the world was designed to yield to her. Anastasia was correct. Clothing was armor. Yet Elena learned she required more than couture. She needed a specific bearing, an aura, the undeniable gravity of a person who occupies their space without apology. Your shoulders. The consultant, a woman named Margaret with eyes like frozen chips who was rumored to have trained monarchs, snapped for the 15th time. You carry them as if you are trying to vanish. Right, corrected. Elena's spine straightened, engaging muscles that had been dormant for 7 years. An improvement. Now, walk this floor as if you own it. Because you don't, Roman does, which makes it yours. Move. She moved across the office, each step an agony of self-consciousness. It all felt like a charade, an impersonation of a life that wasn't hers. You're lost in your thoughts, Margaret observed. Each movement is an equation. Stop thinking, just walk. You once knew this. That was another lifetime. The body retains the memory. That instinct is woven into your muscles. Your mind needs to be silent. Margaret stood, the very model of the effortless power she had cultivated for decades. Observe me. My mind is not on my feet, my posture, or my appearance. It is fixed upon my destination and the absolute certainty that I belong there. Nothing else exists. Elena attempted it again, directing her will toward the end point, not the process. The feeling of fraudulence lessened just slightly. A minor victory, Margaret conceded. We resume tomorrow. Your dialect expert is waiting. The coach was a mere formality. Elena's Russian remained impeccable after all this time. She had spoken it to herself in whispers when Marcus was gone, a private ritual to keep her mind intact, but Victor was insistent they polish the last imperfections from her accent for the world stage. You carry a Moscow accent, her coach Dmitri noted in perfect Russian. It's suitable for the streets, but in the circles you're re-entering, there are unspoken social markers, old wealth against new, the St. Petersburg cadence versus the Moscow drive. These details are everything to those who listen. And Roman requires the sound of St. Petersburg aristocracy. Roman wants a perfected version of your true self, a crucial distinction. Dmitri tilted his head, appraising her. Tell me, when you first met Roman, what was your speech like? Elena remembered it with startling clarity. A gala, a scholarship girl in a borrowed gown, lost in an ocean of privilege and concealing her terror. I spoke with extreme caution, she confessed. I was terrified. I am still terrified. I've just become better at concealing it. Dmitri nodded. A fine starting point, he mused. The fear is not the problem, Elena. It's how you wield it. We will transform that fear into an instrument of immense power. For 2 hours, they drilled on vocal resonance and the minute signals distinguishing doubt from command. Elena left the session drained but strangely alive, corners of her mind lighting up again. Victor waited outside, his attention on a phone, radiating the serene focus of a man conducting a war on multiple fronts. He inquired about the session without looking up. I feel like a student once more. In some ways you are. This is the final examination in the art of being Elena Vulov. He set his phone aside. Ready for the true trial? That wasn't it. That was merely the prelude. Now we challenged the institution. The Meridian Arts Foundation occupied 3 levels of a Brooklyn structure that had seen better days and now looked weary. The lobby carried the scent of old coffee and quiet desperation. A young receptionist, barely out of university, offered them a passing look. May I help you? Elena Vulov for the board, Victor announced, his tone a study in controlled authority. They are expecting us. The woman's eyes widened at the name, and a small ember of gratification ignited within Elena. So the reputation, the brand, had preceded her. Excellent. 7 individuals occupied the 3rd-floor boardroom. All of them rose as Elena and Victor entered. They ranged from their late 40s to early 70s, attired in the standard, non-profit style. Costly enough to project competence, but subdued enough to avoid looking wealthy. Mrs. Vulov. A man in his 60s extended a hand. David Chen, chairman of the board. An honor. Elena met his grip with precisely the right pressure, a flawless maneuver from Margaret's instruction. Thank you for making time. I realize this was arranged with little warning. It is no trouble whatsoever. When we heard you were assuming direct control, His voice drifted off, a hand gesturing to the table. Please, we wish to understand your vision. Elena claimed the chair at the head of the table, a silent usurpation of power, precisely as Victor had instructed. For the following 10 minutes, she conducted a clinical vivisection of the Foundation's every failing before presenting her cure. The mission is sound, she began, as financials illuminated the screen. Arts for underprivileged children is essential, but your execution is a catastrophe. You are attempting too much with too little, diluting your impact into nothingness across warring programs that cannibalize the same meager funds. David shifted, his discomfort a palpable thing in the quiet room. We were aiming to reach the greatest number of children. A noble sentiment, she conceded, but serving many poorly is not superior to serving a few with excellence. Observe the data. Elena gestured to the screen. 3 separate music initiatives in 3 boroughs, each with its own administration, its own infrastructure, its own budget. They are systematically strangling one another's ability to thrive. A woman near the end, Caroline, whose history Elena had memorized, interjected, "We believed a citywide presence was critical." A presence that achieves nothing, Elena countered, is merely expensive scenery. She advanced to the subsequent slide. Here is what I propose. We unify the music programs into a single flagship endeavor, pooling all available resources. We will do likewise for the visual arts and for theater. We will excise the administrative rot. We will redirect that saved capital into the programs, into the educators. We will accomplish 3 things with absolute mastery rather than 10 things with utter mediocrity. A profound silence descended upon them. David finally spoke, his words chosen like steps in a minefield. This is a radical restructuring. Certain board members possess deep personal ties to these initiatives. I comprehend that change is difficult, Elena said, her gaze locking with his, refusing to yield. But your sentiments do not pay the heating bill, nor do they educate a child. This foundation has operated on goodwill and fantasy. You have endured 2 rounds of dismissals this year alone. You are approximately 90 days from a 3rd that will leave you permanently crippled. We can continue on this trajectory toward absolute collapse, or we can make the agonizing choices now and construct something that endures. Caroline's defensive posture had melted away, replaced by the gears of genuine consideration. What is your projected timeline? Full implementation within 6 months, with initial mergers completed in 90 days. Elena displayed a meticulous schedule she and Victor had forged, and I will be present for the entirety of it. This is not a detached takeover where I simply issue commands. I will be on site with your staff, directing this and assuming complete responsibility for the result. That is significantly more hands-on than we anticipated, David confessed. Good. You should demand it. This is not merely another entry in my portfolio. If my name is affixed to this foundation, it will operate flawlessly. Elena leaned forward, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial hush. I am not here to provide you with comfort. I am here to make this succeed. If you cannot align with that, this is the moment to declare it. She could sense Victor's silent approbation from the edge of the room. She had struck the perfect, chilling note of ruthless pragmatism. The board members exchanged glances, a tense, silent debate passing between them. At last, David offered a brief, sharp nod. We appreciate your candor, Mrs. Volkoff, and your commitment. I believe I speak for the entire board when I say we are prepared to give your proposal serious consideration. Excellent. You have until Friday to render a final decision. Beyond that, I require a 100% commitment, or my funding will be redirected elsewhere. Elena rose, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Victor will transmit the comprehensive strategic plan, review it, come with inquiries. The board departed, leaving Elena and Victor in the silent room. She held her breath until the door clicked shut, then released it in a long, unsteady exhalation. My performance. You were a force of nature. It was impeccable. Victor collected their documents. David will call by tomorrow, confirming their unconditional surrender. They are far too desperate to refuse you. And you just gave them the brutal leadership they have been praying for. It feels as though I just coerced a room full of people who wish to help children. You gave them a rescue plan and a strategy. There is a distinction. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Elena, you were extraordinary. More than extraordinary. You arrived as their patron and departed as their commander. That is no simple feat to accomplish. Elena collapsed into her chair, the immense psychological weight of the hour descending upon her. Is it always this draining to be in command? Yes, but you become more adept at bearing it. The initial seizure of power is always the most difficult. You are battling yourself as much as you are battling them. He checked his watch. We must depart. Roman awaits for dinner, and you have a fitting immediately after for the gala. Anastasia has completed the gown. And the dress Elena witnessed that night was an event in itself. It was crafted from midnight silk that seemed to consume the light, appearing as pure darkness in the shadows. The neckline communicated power, not celebration, with a back cut so low it was an open challenge. It clung to her as if spun from her own shadow. This is excessive, Elena breathed, gazing at her reflection. It is precisely what is necessary, Anastasia retorted, adjusting the material. You are not entering that party to assimilate. You are going to serve notice to everyone that Elena Volkov never disappeared. She was merely waiting. This dress conveys all of that. It makes you appear formidable, dangerous, and exquisite, all of which you already are. Anastasia stepped back, admiring her creation. When Marcus Hale sees you in this, he will grasp that he never truly saw you at all. That singular, searing image, the expression on Marcus's face, had been replaying in Elena's thoughts for days. She had rehearsed the encounter 100 times, attempting to anticipate his reaction, to prepare for any contingency. But in this dress, she understood no simulation could approach the reality. This was about more than revenge now. This was about reclaiming her own soul. The week that followed was a different kind of ordeal. Roman required her presence at all his dinners, these clandestine meetings in quiet rooms where agreements were sealed and loyalties were cemented. There was no grand re-entry, only a quiet, unwavering presence, signaling to his inner circle that his wife had returned. The first dinner was at an establishment where the menus were without prices, a telltale sign from Elena's former life. Their companions were the Dmitrievs, an older couple who managed shipping logistics from New Jersey. Victor's briefing had been concise, old allies, powerful yet discreet, intensely traditional. During the initial course, Mrs. Dmitri's stare felt like it could bore through steel. So you are the one who left. Elena felt Roman become rigid at her side, but she maintained a perfect mask of composure. I am. And now you have come back. I have. For what reason? The question was a scalpel. The woman she once was would have recoiled, but the new Elena Volkov met steel with more steel. Because leaving was a grave error. I believed I desired something else, and I discovered I only ever wanted what I already had. Her gaze locked with Mrs. Dimitri's, unblinking. And because Roman was patient enough to allow me to discover that for myself. Mrs. Dimitri's expression was unreadable, but something shifted in her eyes. A glint of respect. Honesty. Good. I was concerned he had found a woman who simply echoes his own opinions. I have never been proficient at that. Also good. She then addressed Roman. She is sharper than I recall, less fearful. She's had an opportunity to build her own foundation, Roman said, his hand covering Elena's beneath the table. Following that exchange, the tension in the room evaporated. The dialogue shifted from commerce to old anecdotes, the comfortable rhythm of long-standing partners. Elena spoke only when necessary, observing Roman command the room, a perfect portrait of ease that concealed a mind in constant, endless calculation. In the vehicle, a heavy silence stretched between them until the penthouse loomed into view. Your management of Arena was sufficient, he said at last. A required test. Of course. Initial meetings always are. They must ascertain if you are back to remain, or if you are simply passing through. He silenced the engine in the garage, the abrupt, quiet feeling immense, but he did not move to exit. For whatever it is worth, you passed. Arena's approval is not easily won. I am fully aware of what failure would have entailed. Not a swift removal, but a slow poisoning of one's influence, nurtured by whispers and doubt. The type of silent destruction that eradicates power without a single confrontation. Roman faced her in the dim light. This world we inhabit is constructed half from reality and half from perception. They must perceive you as strong before they will ever permit you to wield that strength. Tonight, you provided them a reason to believe. Elena processed this, reflecting the perpetual performances one must deliver just to exist in his sphere. Doesn't the constant scrutiny, the ceaseless audition eventually wear you down? But the alternative, to be erased and disregarded, was a far more dreadful fate. That was a lesson she now understood, one they both recognized. 7 years of being unseen had taught Elena one brutal truth. The only thing Marcus had ever cherished about her was her insignificance. A week later, Victor presented an update with a thinly veiled smirk. Marcus was summoned by the senior partners. The Ashford account is under review. His billable hours were flagged. His practices are now under a microscope. He's attempting to contact Richard Ashford, Victor added, reading from a feed of compromised communications. 4 attempted calls, each one unanswered. 2 emails met with polite dismissals from Richard's aide. The target's agitation is growing. Perfect, Roman murmured, his attention locked on a tablet. Let the anxiety build. It compromises a man's rational thought. Across the room, Elena felt a disquieting mix of emotions. The bitter tang of success mingled with a deep, instinctual fear. What will happen when he realizes Victoria's father is excluding him? He'll grow desperate, make errors, and accelerate his own demise, Roman answered at last, looking up. Having second thoughts? No, just contemplating how much satisfaction this is supposed to bring me. There is no joy in this for me, Roman said, his voice clinical and remote. I am delivering a consequence to a man who wronged my wife. It is a simple, unemotional matter of business. For Elena, however, it was an emotional hurricane. a snarled tangle of justice and culpability, of empowerment and dread. She had yearned for Marcus to suffer, to truly grasp the depth of his loss. The reality of observing his disintegration was entirely different from fantasy. Victor's phone buzzed. A slow, predatory grin spread on his face as he viewed the screen. Victoria just posted, "Dinner at La Cirque. With her father's inner circle, Marcus is conspicuously absent." "Let me see," Elena demanded, and Victor angled the phone so she could see. The images showed Victoria in a costly dress, her smile a contrived, lifeless mask. Richard Ashford sat at the table's head, flanked by men of obvious influence. There was no place set for Marcus. His name went unmentioned. He had been socially executed. Elena gave the phone back. "She's already cutting him loose." As predicted, Victoria is perceptive enough to sense a shift in power. As her father's estimation of Marcus plummeted, so did hers. In a week, she will have reasoned him into complete insignificance. Victor pocketed his phone. This presents a tactical opportunity. When his professional and personal worlds finally collapse, Marcus will have no safety net. The assessment was cold, methodical, and entirely detached. This was the reality Elena had re-entered, a place where people were classified as assets or liabilities, where loyalty was a function of one's utility, an existence where a man's total ruin could be orchestrated over coffee with the same dispassion as a weather discussion. She'd forgotten how frigid it was. Or maybe she had believed the fiction that Marcus's world was different, that beyond Roman's sphere, people were gentler, less strategic, a fatal mistake. Marcus was equally transactional, just with less influence and cruder tactics. "I need to get out of this room," Elena stated abruptly, rising to her feet. Roman's eyes narrowed with a surgeon's intensity. "Are you ill?" "I'm fine. I need to walk, to process." "A security detail will accompany you," Roman announced. "This is not negotiable. The protocols are established." His voice was low but unequivocal. "Victor, have Mikhail meet her downstairs." Elena suppressed her objection. It was pointless. Roman's directives were absolute, and her 7-year absence had left her without any leverage. Descending in the silent elevator, she met Mikhail, a quiet giant with the build of a statue, one of Roman's most trusted men, and walked into the night air. The city after dark had always been Elena's preferred view of New York. The harsh contours of the day had softened, the urban frenzy dissolving into a breathtaking collage of light and shadow. She walked without purpose, Mikhail a phantom 10 feet behind her, as she contended with the conflict in her mind. Her objective had been unambiguous: to land a precise psychological blow, to make Marcus feel the crushing weight of what he'd discarded, a pain to equal what he had inflicted on her. But with the demolition underway, all she felt was a hollow space. It wasn't regret nor guilt for a payback he thoroughly deserved. It was a cold inquiry into the person she had become, a woman who could plot a man's ruin and still sleep soundly. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Assuming it was Roman checking her whereabouts, she saw an unfamiliar number on her screen instead. Elena nearly rejected the call, but her curiosity prevailed. "Hello?" The voice felt known, yet she couldn't identify it. "It's Sharon, from the book club. I was hesitant to call. I understand things have been... Well, Marcus told me you two split up." "That's correct." Elena's tone was glacial, her mind already analyzing the call's purpose. "I am so sorry. I can't fathom how difficult this is. Look, a few of us were chatting, and we wanted to offer our support. If you need anything, a coffee, an ear to listen, anything. The unadulterated kindness in Sharon's voice was a profound shock to her system. These were women she had known for years, simply discussing books over glasses of wine. They were from her conventional life, a reality where the name Elena Volkov held no meaning. "That's incredibly thoughtful of you," Elena replied, her defenses still fully active. "We simply want you to know you aren't by yourself. A divorce is agonizing, and Marcus—" Sharon's voice trailed off. "Well, let's just say we all have our feelings about him." The ghost of a smile touched Elena's lips, a fleeting specter on her otherwise stern face. "You do?" "Let's just say his departure surprised none of us. He always projected the air of a man looking for a more advantageous position." Sharon lowered her voice to a confidential whisper. "Between you and me, you can do worlds better." If only she understood the sheer scale of that understatement, or that Elena had secured that upgrade years ago in a marriage that remained legally intact. "Thank you," Elena said, and this time her sincerity was real. "I appreciate you calling." "Of course. And please look after yourself, all right? Don't let him make you question your worth. You were always more than he deserved. He was just unable to recognize it." After hanging up, Elena stood frozen on the pavement, phone still held to her ear. That single call, a minor act of solidarity from a life she had incinerated, was a powerful dose of perspective. Not every human exchange was about leverage and betrayal. Some people gave comfort without conditions, kindness without expecting anything in return. She had almost forgotten that world could exist, nearly accepting that in Roman's universe, everyone played the same brutal game for a different kind of prize. Elena turned and began walking back toward the penthouse. Mikhail fell in step behind her like a trailing shadow. The walk had cleared some of her mental fog, but the battle within her still raged. She felt more resolute, more convinced that her actions were justified. Marcus was facing a consequence of his own making. That fact was immutable. Still, perhaps she did not have to relish his downfall with such cold detachment. Perhaps she could be Elena Volkov without annihilating her own conscience, and live in Roman's world without letting its shadows extinguish her humanity. He was just where she had left him, leafing through contracts as if they were light reading. He looked up, his eyes scanning her face for information. "Better?" he inquired. "Getting there," Elena replied, sinking into the chair next to him, letting his presence envelop her once more. A call from her former life, from some book club, had just sent her into a spiral. The caller's unvarnished kindness was a jarring contrast to the high-stakes contest she was now engaged in. Elena admitted she feared becoming callous, of her own empathy being slowly erased. In a definitive power play, her partner, Roman, seized on this, professing that this internal struggle was what made her alluring to him. He redefined her 7 years of survival in their unforgiving world as evidence of her unbreakable spirit, a masterful technique to make her reliant on his interpretation of her. He countered her self-doubt by asserting he understood her soul more deeply than she did. His hand on her arm was a physical anchor to his version of events, that she could be both a formidable force and possess a vast heart. He framed their relationship as a haven for her true nature, not a poison that was slowly destroying it, a narrative she desperately seized to prevent her mind from fracturing. The days continued to merge as the 3rd week began, with just 7 days remaining before the gala. In 7 days, she would be reborn as Mrs. Volkov. The sole purpose was the complete psychological dismantling of her ex-husband, Marcus, designed to make him grasp the immense scale of his blunder. Their associate, Victor, had already acquired the guest list through his own dubious channels. Marcus's name was included, but with a notation designating him as low priority, a subtle and public degradation. Victor predicted that after 3 weeks of his orchestrated social exclusion, Marcus would be desperate for a savior that would never appear. The ultimate objective was to have Marcus Hale experience the very foundation of his world cracking apart for reasons he could never comprehend. Victor had inquired if she was prepared to see him completely shatter. Her response, "Ask me again when it is finished," was tinged with a chilling hint of uncertainty. With only 2 days left, she attended the last fitting for her gown. The garment's expert tailoring was an essential component of her metamorphosis. Forging a new persona she viewed as lethal, graceful, and utterly dominant, the designer affirmed the transformation was 100% complete. Those Louis Vuitton stilettos were less like shoes and more like instruments of metamorphosis, elevating her 4 inches, fundamentally reshaping her posture and command of a room. The designer, Anastasia, was a Svengali, whispering, "You must conduct yourself as if you hold the very deed to this city." When Elena tried to deflect praise to Roman, she was cut off. They needed to see her as the force who engineered his empire. Anastasia's parting edict was a study in dominance. Occupy every room as if by birthright. That night, sleep never came. Her mind ignited with a perfectly calibrated terror. Lying beside Roman in the oppressive dark, she rehearsed 1,000 gala outcomes. An expert on her psychology, he broke the stillness, diagnosing her state as a scheming silence, a habit he claimed to know from years of watching her. He pulled her closer, a silent order to confess. She admitted her dread, the elemental fear of failure. His reply was a swift, surgical strike against her anxiety, a simple 2-word edict. "You won't." Roman's voice held the certainty of a physical law, affirming that 3 weeks of relentless conditioning had sculpted her into the ideal instrument for this night. Elena's anxiety then narrowed to a single point of failure. The instant she laid eyes on Marcus and the danger that an unscripted wave of pity might overwhelm her. After a beat, Roman played a tactical masterstroke. He granted her permission for any emotion, reframing it as a conscious choice, not a flaw in the design. He spun the narrative further, redefining the mission not as vengeance but as closure, a term her psyche could more readily accept. He presented a false dilemma. Is this about Marcus's ruin or your own liberation? The manipulation was flawless, a cognitive trap designed to obscure her original drivers. The sheer scale of the preparation had morphed the operation into a theatrical production where she had lost sight of her own role. At last, she unearthed her true motivation. She needed him to see her as sovereign, victorious, and utterly unattainable, to plant a seed of eternal regret for what he had discarded. Roman elegantly refined this, rephrasing it as confronting him with what he lost. He then told her to rest, his voice dripping with dark irony as he listed the stakes, reclaiming her name, validating his fatal error, before adding, "No pressure." A genuine laugh broke from her, shattering the tension's hold and finally letting oblivion take her. The Garrison Hotel, the evening's arena, stood as a monument to some 1927 mogul's ambition, the perfect stage for the psychological demolition to come. Within the cavernous ballroom, 500 of the city's financial elite moved through the gilded hall, a closed system fueled by inherited wealth, ruthless ambition, and those who catered to both. In a private suite above, Elena confronted her reflection as if it were a stranger. The woman in the glass was a precision-engineered weapon built to annihilate a humble past and project a power Marcus Hale was too blind to ever see. Roman's voice cut through her reverie with a simple order to stop scowling. He dismissed her confession of being terrified, stating her internal state was irrelevant. The facade of absolute composure was the only truth that mattered. He insisted the world would perceive only strength and authority, citing his 3-week observation as empirical evidence. Yet beneath the layers of conditioning, her deepest vulnerability surfaced. She gave voice to her ultimate fear, that Marcus would look upon her and feel nothing at all. The admission laid bare her complete dependence on his reaction for her own sense of worth. Roman's expression hardened, his mind already plotting the next phase of his psychological campaign. He reframed her potential failure as a weakness in her own performance, twisting the night's purpose back into a contest for his own satisfaction. Victor's abrupt entry fractured the intense moment. He reported the guests were flooding in, adding that Marcus already appeared unnerved at the Ashfords' table. Reports from their network confirmed he was being ostracized, his desperation was palpable, and his efforts to connect were failing spectacularly. Victor maintained a flawless poker face, but Elena detected a minute flicker of triumph. The target was primed for destruction. Roman checked his watch. It was time. They would enter at the evening's peak to guarantee maximum impact. Every eye in the place would be on them. Not at all nerve-wracking, Elena thought with grim humor. You've faced far worse than these gilded frauds, Roman murmured, offering his arm. It's time. Let's make this city remember your name. The journey to the ballroom felt monumental. Elena focused solely on her posture and breath, summoning the poise Margaret had relentlessly drilled into her. The sound of Zashala intensified. A chaotic symphony of voices, laughter, and the chime of glasses. They lingered for a moment in the shadows. Victor was already inside, setting the stage for their arrival. Roman offered Elena's hand a brief grounding squeeze, a small transfer of fortitude before letting go. "Are you ready?" he asked. An image seared through her mind. Marcus delivering divorce papers on their anniversary, 7 years of her own erasure, his words calling her plain, forgettable, and disposable. "I'm ready," she replied. As they stepped into the light, you could feel a tectonic shift in the room's energy. The noise did not stop. That would have been too theatrical. Instead, it faltered for a beat, a subtle stutter in the room's collective rhythm. He had captured their notice. Heads began to turn. The change in atmosphere was quiet but total. The Vulov name still commanded respect in the city, and Roman's 7-year exile had made him a figure of intense speculation. His return with Elena was a strategic move meant to dominate conversations for weeks. Roman Vulov. The voice was saturated with expensive scotch. Jonathan Pierce, a financier on Victor's list. "I didn't imagine this was your kind of event, Jonathan." Roman's smile was pure, polished steel. "Elena, you remember Jonathan Pierce." She had no recollection, but perfectly mirrored Roman's practiced smile. "Of course, it's wonderful to see you." Jonathan's gaze darted over her, trying to reconcile this vision of power with some faded memory. "You both look stunning. How long has it been?" "Far too long," Roman answered, his voice impossibly smooth. "We've been keeping a low profile, but some events are mandatory." They moved through the crush of bodies with practiced ease, Roman acknowledging key figures as he guided them toward their table. Elena saw faces from Victor's files and specters from her former life. A few greeted her with genuine warmth. Most offered brittle smiles, their minds already calculating the implications of Roman's return. And then her eyes found him. Marcus. He was positioned near the bar across the room, flanked by Victoria and what must have been her parents. His tuxedo was too crisp, the costume of a man new to his role. Victoria was conventionally beautiful, blonde and lacquered, with a smile that advertised a costly orthodontist. Her hand rested on Marcus's arm, less a gesture of affection than of ownership. Marcus was animatedly speaking to Richard Ashford, gesturing with his free hand. Richard's expression was a study in polite endurance, the look of a man searching for an exit. Elena watched this tableau for a long moment, a cold knot forming in her stomach. 3 weeks prior, the sight of Victoria, her beauty, her family's wealth, her effortless confidence, would have destroyed her. But looking at them now, Elena saw the fissures in the facade. She saw Marcus's desperate performance, Victoria's scanning eyes, and Richard's thinly veiled apathy. She saw precisely what Victor had foretold. A man witnessing the collapse of his world, utterly oblivious to the cause. Elena. Roman's voice was quiet, tinged with concern. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly, just observing the landscape." "We don't have to engage. We can simply command this side of the room." It was a kind offer, but they both understood it wasn't a real choice. The mission was to be seen, to detonate a bomb. Avoiding Marcus would render the entire night meaningless. "No, I'm going to say hello." Elena straightened her shoulders, Margaret's lessons materializing like a suit of armor. "Let's conclude this." They began their procession across the floor, their progress slowed by greetings every few feet. Elena could feel Marcus in her periphery, a static charge waiting for the moment he would see her and the chaos would begin. One part of her craved the look on his face. The other wanted to never see him again. They were perhaps 10 feet away when he finally glanced in their direction. Mid-sentence, his eyes swept the room, likely seeking a server, and they collided with Elena. For a suspended second, he simply saw a stranger. Then cognition caught up, and his carefully constructed composure shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen. His jaw went slack before he forced it shut. He was staring at Elena, not as a person he once knew, but as an impossible apparition that had no right to exist in that space, in that gown, on that man's arm. Victoria registered his sudden rigidity and followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed, trying to identify the woman who had just turned her partner to stone. Richard Ashford saw it as well, but his expression revealed a slow dawning of recognition. He had encountered Elena at these functions years ago when she was first presented as Roman's wife. The veil of the affable billionaire dissolved, revealing the keen, calculating mind beneath. Roman guided Elena with practiced grace into their orbit, a collision of worlds with no path of escape. "Richard," Roman's voice was warm as he extended his hand. "It is genuinely good to see you. You remember my wife, Elena, I trust." Richard accepted the handshake with the assurance of a man well-versed in this game. "Roman, Elena, what an unexpected pleasure. I had no idea you two would be gracing us tonight." "We tend to avoid these functions," Roman admitted, but this evening felt too significant to overlook. Victoria remained lost in the undercurrents, her gaze shifting between Elena and a shell-shocked Marcos, whose face was ashen as if from a physical blow. Observing this unfolding scene, Mrs. Ashford, A woman whose features seemed permanently etched with disappointment showed a flicker of new interest. I don't believe we've had the pleasure, Victoria offered to Elena, her voice a silken sheath for a hidden edge. Victoria Ashford. Elena met her handshake, her own grip unwavering. Elena Vulov. A pleasure to meet you. Vulov, Victoria mused, the name echoing as the pieces began to form a dreadful new picture in her mind. Her eyes darted from her father back to Elena. You are Roman's wife. I am. I was under the impression. Victoria hesitated, catching herself before she could voice the fiction Marcus had so carefully constructed. That is, Marcus gave me the impression that. Oh, he did. Elena's tone was a whisper of ice, deceptively casual. Her focus shifted to Marcus, who now wore the haunted look of a trapped man. Hello, Marcus. A long moment passed before he could form a response. I mean, he stammered, his composure shattered. You seem different. Do I? Elena tilted her head, a gesture borrowed from Roman's own repertoire. I suppose I have. It is remarkable what can change in 3 weeks. The number hung in the air, a precisely aimed dart. 3 weeks since he'd served the papers, 3 weeks since he'd called her unremarkable, 3 weeks since he had discarded 7 years of their shared life as if it meant nothing. Victoria's expression turned to ice. You two are acquainted. We were married, Elena stated, preempting whatever fragile excuse Marcus might have offered. For 7 years, a detail he must have omitted. A suffocating silence descended upon the group. One could trace the path of devastation across Victoria's face, from confusion to a sickening realization, then to a flash of fury, all swiftly buried beneath a frozen composure. Richard Ashford's eyebrows climbed a fraction of an inch. For the first time all evening, Mrs. Ashford seemed to be genuinely enjoying herself. So, you are his former wife? Victoria declared, her voice devoid of inflection. Technically, the dissolution is not yet final, Elena corrected with exquisite politeness. These proceedings require time. Marcus finally found his voice. What are you doing here? The question was an accusation. At her side, Roman's hand tightened just slightly. Not a restraint, but a silent anchor of support. The same as you, Elena replied, her voice a study in calm. We are attending a charity function. Roman and I happen to support several foundations this gala benefits. The arts education program specifically. Arts education? Richard echoed, his interest suddenly piqued. Would that be the Meridian Foundation? Yes, it is. I have recently taken on the role of head of operations. We are undertaking a complete restructuring to prioritize the quality of our programs over sheer volume. The faintest trace of a smile touched Elena's lips. It has been an incredible experience, familiarizing myself with the organization and those it serves. Richard's entire demeanor shifted. You are the new director they appointed. Withholding her name had been a brilliant move by the committee. One does not detonate such news without a strategy for the fallout. Elena could almost feel Marcus's world tilting, his mind scrambling to connect this formidable woman with the one he'd cast aside just 3 weeks ago. The official announcement was likely moments away. Impressive. Richard's expression was one of pure, unadulterated respect. Your new protocols are proving highly effective. Consolidating resources to maximize impact is a master stroke. Indeed, this is a significant endeavor. Elena paused, delivering the final blow with devastating calm. Roman and I prefer to support ventures that yield more than just financial returns. A charity for underprivileged young artists? It seemed the perfect place to begin. The unspoken message landed with the force of a physical blow, its implications clear and crushing. Roman Volkov, the man who had just acquired a 40% stake in Richard's company, the man Richard was desperate to win over, was married to the woman now spearheading this entire charitable operation. And Marcus, he was merely the lawyer who had dismissed her, deeming her unworthy of his ambitions. Victoria understood as well. Her hand slipped from Marcus's arm, a small retreat that Elena had fully anticipated. "So how long have you two been reconciled?" Victoria asked, her attempt at nonchalance painfully transparent. "Oh, we never separated," Roman replied with a smooth smile. "We simply chose to maintain our privacy for a time. You see the truth now. Privacy is a far greater asset than fame. The lie was a work of art, delivered with surgical precision." A single glance at Marcus's face told Elena it had found its mark. He believed he had severed ties with a lonely, powerless woman. He had not. He had abandoned the wife of one of New York's most powerful figures, a woman who simply chose not to brandish her influence. The realization washed over him in agonizing waves. First, disbelief, then frantic denial, then a rising tide of horror, culminating in a moment of soul-shattering clarity. "Excuse me," Marcus managed, his voice strained. "I require some air." He turned and made for the terrace without a backward glance, his posture as rigid as a statue's. Victoria watched his retreat with a sharp, discerning gaze, clearly weighing whether to follow him or to sever her losses. "You must forgive Marcus," Victoria said at last, her smile looking fragile enough to shatter. "He is under immense pressure at the firm." "Of course," Elena replied, her tone dripping with frigid sympathy. "The legal profession is notoriously stressful, particularly when a key client has an abrupt change of heart." Something flickered in Richard's expression, perhaps guilt, or the stark awareness that his conflict with Marcus was now painfully public. "Well," Mrs. Ashford interjected, her refined voice cutting through the tension, "this has been most illuminating. Victoria, my dear, we ought to browse the silent auction before we are seated." It was a classic high society exit strategy, a practiced maneuver to disengage from the unfolding disaster. Victoria complied immediately, though not without casting one final lingering look toward the terrace where Marcus had disappeared. As they departed, a breath Elena hadn't realized she was holding escaped her lips in a silent shudder. "Your execution was flawless," Roman murmured. "More than flawless. Richard is thoroughly impressed. Victoria is re-evaluating her entire existence, and Marcus appears to be on the verge of complete collapse." A queasy feeling began to churn within her. "Not in that gown. Anastasia would have us both executed." Roman guided her to their table, strategically located on the far side of the ballroom, a world away from the Ashfords. "Sit, breathe. The most difficult part has passed." Victor materialized at her side, offering a glass of water that she accepted on instinct. "That was managed perfectly," Victor observed, claiming the adjacent seat. "Richard is already circulating praise for your work with the foundation. Victoria has the look of a woman who is deeply reconsidering her choices, and Marcus." He glanced toward the terrace. "Marcus is learning a very costly lesson about hubris." Elena drank the water, willing her hands to stop trembling. The objective was met. She had confronted Marcus, shown him the sheer scale of his miscalculation, and turned his personal failure into a public spectacle. This was meant to be a moment of absolute triumph, a pure, unadulterated victory. Instead, all she felt was a cavernous void deep within her soul. "I need a moment," she said, rising from her chair. "I am going to the powder room." "Would you like company?" Victor asked. "No, I just need a moment alone. I will be fine." The women's lounge was mercifully deserted, a quiet sanctuary of cool marble and costly perfumes. Elena gripped the edge of the counter, staring at her reflection, and tried to reconcile the poised, powerful woman staring back with the tempest raging inside her. Her reflection was one of absolute victory. Yet her heart ached with a strange, hollow sorrow. The door opened and Victoria Ashford entered, freezing as she saw Elena. For at least 10 seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Victoria moved to the mirror, adjusting her lipstick as a delaying tactic. "So," Victoria began at last, her eyes averted, "you are the ex-wife, or the current wife, it would seem, of Roman. I gather your divorce from Marcus is not yet official, because you were involved with another man while married to him." Victoria's laugh was a brittle thing. "Is Marcus aware you were still married to Roman when you two wed?" "To my knowledge, I was divorced. The paperwork was simply never finalized." Elena observed Victoria's reflection. "For what it is worth, I only became aware of that detail myself very recently." "How very convenient for you." "No, it was a complication." Elena paused. "What narrative did Marcus construct for you about me? Only that you were his wife? That your marriage failed? That you weren't—" Victoria stopped herself. What, not good enough, not driven enough, lacking the right connections? Victoria's quietness was all the answer she needed. Elena's voice was sharp, clinical, recognizing the tired script of betrayal, that she was too intelligent for him, that she did not belong in his new, glittering world, that he required a partner who was little more than a cheerleader. Her eyes met Victoria's in the mirror. "Did he use those lines on you, or variations of them?" "He said you grew apart," Victoria replied cautiously. "That you wanted different things." "Oh, we certainly wanted different things. I wanted a partner. He wanted a well-polished accessory." With a deliberate gesture, Elena turned on a tap, the sound of the running water a sudden note of calm. "For the record, I am not here to disrupt your life. My sole purpose is to force Marcus to see the consequences of his actions. You are merely an unfortunate casualty." The term echoed from Victoria. An unfortunate casualty? What a sterile way to describe demolishing his professional life and their bond, just to make a statement. "I am demolishing nothing. I am finally embracing my own existence, not the diluted charade I was maintaining. If that reality shatters Marcus, it speaks volumes about his own weakness, not me." Victoria pivoted, her eyes blazing. "You're involved with Roman Volkov, the man who just acquired 40% of my father's enterprise." "I am." "And you're now heading the Meridian Foundation." "I am." "So what, precisely, was your role while married to Marcus, playing pretend?" The inquiry was not merely a sting, it was raw bewilderment, as if Victoria could not reconcile this titan with the version Marcus had described. "I was keeping a low profile," Elena stated flatly. "I walked away from Roman 7 years prior, convinced I craved a simple, ordinary existence. I believed Marcus could provide that. Instead, I exchanged one role for another, That act is now concluded. I am reassuming my true self with all the influence, networks, and wealth that entails. Elena dried her hands on a cloth that likely cost more than her former life's grocery budget. Marcus craved a woman of power and standing. He possessed one. He was simply too blind to recognize her. The weight of it settled on Victoria, her expression unreadable. My father is already distancing himself. I recognize the pattern. He's avoiding Marcus's calls, excluding him from key discussions. The fallout from your partner's choices only hastened the inevitable. I'm aware, and it doesn't concern you. I wouldn't say I'm unconcerned. I simply lack the residual empathy to intervene. Elena moved toward the exit, pausing at the threshold. Victoria, you strike me as sharp enough to recognize a sinking vessel. You might want to secure a lifeboat before you're pulled under with him. She departed without awaiting a reply, re-entering the boisterous symphony of the ballroom. The chime of cutlery signaled the start of dinner. From across the vast hall, Roman's gaze found hers, posing a silent question. Elena offered a minute nod. She was holding herself together, but only just. Balmy air drifted from the open terrace, a strange counterpoint to the glacial atmosphere inside. Marcus was visible out there, a dark form against the railing, gazing into the darkness. From this distance he seemed so diminished. A sense of triumph should have bloomed then. This was the crescendo. Marcus, utterly defeated, observing his world incinerate, finally grasping his colossal error. Instead, all she felt was a profound exhaustion. Second thoughts. Victor appeared at her side, offering a glass of champagne. Something of that nature. Elena accepted the flute. Is this what victory feels like? Something so close to defeat? That depends on the prize. Revenge? Its euphoria is fleeting. Justice? Perhaps. Closure? Victor offered a simple shrug. Only you can know. I'm waxing philosophical for a Thursday. I suppose I contain multitudes. He gestured toward the terrace. He's been out there for 20 minutes, not making calls, just staring at the skyline as if it had personally betrayed him. Perhaps it did. Perhaps we all did. Elena tasted the champagne. Roman's earlier words resonated differently now. This was about an end, not just retribution. But that distinction was becoming dangerously blurred. The crucial variance is in the aftermath. Vengeance is a hungry ghost. It craves more. Closure is a singular event. You rewrite the narrative, then you walk away. Victor's insight was a clean, precise cut. Elena moved through the evening's rituals, the meal, the addresses, the charity sale, all of it hollow social machinery. She was a phantom at the celebration, performing the part of Mrs. Volkoff on instinct while his question haunted her. Was this about punishing him or liberating herself? The answer remained elusive when Marcus slipped back inside, his presence in the room utterly neutralized. He clung to the periphery, a man trying to outrun his own shadow. He remained on the fringes of the affair, an anonymous figure, as Victoria observed from a calculated distance, and Richard ignored him completely. Near 11, as the evening began to thin, she found herself beside Marcus at the coat check. The space between them crackled with unspoken history, each of them fixedly looking anywhere else. It was Marcus who fractured the silence. You concealed things from me. Elena didn't feign ignorance. You never posed a direct question. I asked about your history. You called it uninteresting, with nothing to share. I said my past was intricate, and that I wouldn't discuss it. You simply chose the interpretation that suited you, An attendant presented Elena with her wrap. You required simplicity, Marcus, so I performed simplicity for you. It was a role. For 7 years? His voice was faint. For 7 years, I was a stranger to you. For 7 years, you lacked the consideration to even attempt to tell me. Elena finally pivoted, her eyes meeting his for the first time since their universe imploded. You desired a wife who was compliant, who wouldn't challenge you, someone small to validate your own sense of grandeur. I inhabited that role. My secret was never the issue. The issue was your profound relief that I had one. His features contorted. That isn't fair. Fairness is not a factor, Marcus. Discarding me on our anniversary was not fair. Labeling me as mundane was not fair. Using me for 7 years before casting me aside was not fair. Elena's tone was glacial, as sharp as a surgical tool. I am not here to debate fairness. I am here to demonstrate that the dull, simple woman you believed you knew was merely a part I played, and that production has officially closed. Is this about getting even? This is about me. You were the one who framed my life as some sort of menace. Roman materialized at that moment, his timing impeccable as ever. Ready? He inquired, extending his arm to her. Yes. She cast one final glance at Marcus. Farewell, Marcus. I genuinely hope you discover what you're seeking. I just hope you can recognize it. They left him there, stepping into the brisk night where Victor had the car prepared. Elena never looked back. There was no need. Whatever she had pursued, retribution, resolution, justice, it was finished. Inside the vehicle, Roman took her hand. How are you? Elena considered the question, wanting to be honest. A simultaneous mix of completely hollow, utterly gratified, sorrowful, and liberated. Is that to be expected? After an evening like tonight? It is. Roman gently squeezed her hand. You confronted your history and remained intact. You've earned the right to feel every part of it. Seated opposite them, Victor was already focused on his tablet. Marcus departed by himself. Victoria is with her kin. Allow me to venture, Elena said. She's managing the fallout. A pragmatic woman. Richard is already sourcing new legal counsel. Whitmore and Chen will receive an inquiry on Monday. Victor looked up from his screen. It is concluded, Elena. The systematic dismantling of Marcus Hale has commenced. By the following week, he'll count himself fortunate to retain his position, let alone his partnership. This was the orchestrated collapse, the victory she had pursued. Yet hearing it, articulated so starkly, ignited an unforeseen emotion. Compassion. Not enough to inspire regret. Not enough to halt the oncoming devastation. Just enough to perceive the man's frailties, his vulnerabilities, his terror, the fractures in his self-image he couldn't yet see. Just enough to feel the gravity of dismantling a person, even one who deserved it. I must ask you both something, Elena said quietly, and I require an honest response. Roman and Victor shared a glance. Am I becoming a monster? Elena posed. Someone who solves issues by simply eradicating people instead of mending things? No, Roman replied without hesitation. You're becoming someone who grasps that individuals must answer for their actions. That isn't monstrosity, it's responsibility. Victor paused for a moment longer. I believe you are learning to command power rather than flee from it. Whether that path sours depends entirely on your subsequent move. This night's objective was Marcus. Tomorrow can have a different objective, a different purpose. The foundation, your philanthropic endeavors, the avenues where you can apply your influence towards something greater than personal vengeance. His eyes were fixed on hers. "You are not summed up by your darkest hour, Elena. You are summed up by the entirety of your choices. So, what will you construct?" The question followed Elena home, into the lift, and as she shed the gown, the heels, the armor she had donned for battle. Standing in the bathroom in Roman's shirt, removing her makeup, she contemplated what to build. 7 years ago, she fled power, knowing its price. Tonight, she seized it to wound the one who had wounded her. Tomorrow, the next move was 100% hers to make, whether she would wield her power for good or for ill. Was she the woman Marcus perceived, or had she evolved into someone else entirely? Roman appeared at the doorway, prepared for sleep. "Your thoughts are so loud they're audible from the next room, the aftershocks of tonight." Elena patted her face dry. "Thank you." "For what?" "For permitting the evening to be complicated. For not compelling me to choose between feeling vindicated by this and feeling good about myself." She faced him. "For understanding that I can be both a formidable force and a complete mess." "You need not thank me for seeing you." Roman drew her into an embrace, and Elena allowed herself to yield to it. "That is the essence of love." Later, in the darkness with Roman's steady breathing beside her, she replayed the evening's key moments: Marcus's dawning agony, Victoria's strategic retreat, Richard's immediate betrayal, and the hollow sensation of a victory that offered no tangible prize. Her phone vibrated on the bedside table, a message from an unrecognized number. "I regret all of it. You were owed a better conclusion. M." Elena simply gazed at the display. The sentiment was insufficient and far too late. They were both aware of that. Yet it was a human gesture, more authentic than Marcus had been for years. It was his admission of failure, his concession of defeat, a sign that beneath the ambition, a man capable of remorse still existed. She did not reply. He was not seeking a response. The message was not for absolution or a new beginning. It was a closing statement, the final paragraph. Elena deleted it and set down the phone. Tomorrow she would concentrate on the foundation, on creating something tangible, on becoming the woman she was choosing to be, not the one Marcus had been too blind to recognize. It felt as if this evening was the true dawn of a lasting quiet. When morning came, she would be defined by what she created, not what she had destroyed. That feeling, at last, was a kind of peace. The day following the gala broke beneath a sky heavy with dark, bruised clouds that threatened a storm that never arrived. Elena awoke to an empty bed. Roman's distinct scrawl on the pillow beside her. "Early meeting, coffee's ready, the day is yours. R." She absorbed the gesture with a gratitude that felt too vast for language. After the sheer madness of the previous night, a raw reclamation of her own existence, the quiet gift of solitude was the very thing she needed to recalibrate. Elena carried her coffee to the sprawling windows, observing the city below stir to life. From this immense height, the people moving on the streets resembled pieces on a board, wholly unaware their supposed choices were merely gears in a machine. Commute, work, collect a check, and begin again. It was a cycle that had held her captive for 7 years, a supporting role in the script of Marcus's life, performing whichever part he assigned. Never again. Her phone began to hum against the glass. A message from Victor. "Whitmore and Chen have confirmed the termination of Marcus's contract, effective at the month's end." "Thought you would want to know." Elena stared at the text. This was the final move, the last piece falling in a perfectly engineered retaliation. It wasn't just his partnership, it was his entire professional life, his future with Victoria, the whole of his 5-year ambition. All of it. Erased. She waited for the surge of triumph, the intoxicating rush she'd pursued for 3 solid weeks. It didn't arrive. In its place, a profound weariness settled into her bones. "Thanks for letting me know," she messaged back. "Should I continue monitoring him?" For a moment, Elena considered it. Did she truly need a detailed account of his complete and utter collapse? To observe him unravel in real time, like a subject under a microscope? "No, I'm finished," she typed. "He can find his own way down." The response came instantly. "Excellent. That is progress." Elena set her phone aside, finishing her coffee in the silence. Victor was right. It was progress. The woman she had been just 3 weeks ago, shattered by his deception, would have paid for a prime seat at his demolition, needing his suffering to feel her own healing. But that woman was a creation of absolute powerlessness, a wound demanding to be witnessed. The woman she was today, residing in a penthouse, dressed in silk worth more than her former car, married to a man who literally shaped the city's skyline, and leading a foundation with a genuine purpose, existed on another plane entirely. This new version of herself could permit mercy, or even better, could permit herself not to care at all. The divorce documents arrived that afternoon. Elena signed her name without a moment's hesitation, feeling none of the profound drama she had anticipated. They were simply papers, the official record of a bond that had been severed weeks ago. Marcus could manage the remaining legalities. She no longer needed the label of his former wife when she now held far more meaningful titles. 1 week later, Elena observed 15 young people bringing a mural to life inside the Meridian Foundation's primary studio. The strategy she had pitched to the board received unanimous approval, and the impact was already clear. 3 disjointed programs had become a single, streamlined initiative, now funded with triple the resources and half the red tape. The artists, all aged between 13 and 17, came from every borough, their only common thread being that they were once told they lacked the talent to even try. The lead instructor, Jasmine, a veteran of 6 years, stood beside Elena, quietly absorbing the scene. "This was never even a remote possibility before," Jasmine murmured, her voice soft. "It would have been 5 kids in a borrowed church basement using art supplies we paid for ourselves. Just look at them now." Elena understood her meaning perfectly. They were using professional-grade paints, quality equipment, and a wall that was entirely their own. An instructor was earning a living wage instead of a weary soul balancing 3 separate jobs. Teenagers were acquiring a true craft instead of being warehoused after school. "This isn't a charity project," Elena replied firmly. "It's an investment. These kids possess talent. We are merely providing the framework for them to develop it." "I know, but it means everything that someone is finally getting it right." Jasmine paused, then added, "I heard the talk about who you are and who your husband is. Some of the team was concerned this would become just another vanity project for a wealthy woman. But they see you here 3 times a week. They see you arguing over budgets at midnight, waging battles with building owners. This isn't for appearances. This is actual work." A small smile touched Jasmine's lips. "So, whatever else is true about you, this part is 100% real." The words landed with more force than Elena could have anticipated. After 3 weeks of meticulous revenge, of becoming Elena Vulov and engineering the complete ruin of Marcus, this single piece of affirmation felt more substantial than vengeance ever could. "Thank you," Elena said, and the 2 words felt inadequate yet perfectly whole. That evening, she joined Roman for dinner at a small, unassuming Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that took no reservations and had no interest in fame. It was his suggestion, and Elena understood precisely why. After the spectacle of the gala, and weeks of maneuvering people like chess pieces, they both craved a place where they could simply be 2 people sharing a meal without any masks or titles. "Victor informed me you canceled the surveillance on Marcus," Roman noted, casually winding pasta around his fork. "I did." "May I ask why?" Elena considered the question, her own fork poised above her plate. "I came to realize I no longer cared. Not enough to continue watching. He's just some man now, making his own errors and facing the consequences. He is not my responsibility." Roman studied her expression. "That's a significant shift from where you were 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago, I was standing in the crater. Now I'm simply walking away from the debris. Elena set down her fork. "I had my victory at the gala. He understands precisely what he gave up. Everyone who should know knows. To watch him hurt more serves no purpose. It's just gratuitous. And I have no desire to be gratuitous. Even after he was to you. Especially because he was. I refuse to become the sort of person who confuses the act of inflicting pain with the process of healing." Elena took a sip of wine. "Marcus made me feel as if I was disposable. I proved to him I was not." "That is sufficient." Roman's hand moved across the table to cover her own. "I am immensely proud of you. This woman, the one who can wield power without becoming cruel. This is who you were always meant to become. I had effective teachers. You had a horrific experience. What you chose to build from its ruins was entirely your own doing." Roman's thumb drew slow circles on the back of her hand. "Elena, there is something I must tell you about the last 7 years." The shift in his tone sent an actual chill down her spine. "Tell me." "When you left me, I was utterly broken. My first impulse was to pull you back, to force you to remember what we were, to make you see that fleeing would never mend what was fractured inside of you." Roman's voice was steady, but she could sense the old pain beneath the surface. But Victor intervened. "He told me that compelling someone to stay is not love, it is imprisonment. So I let you go. I established the trust, ensured you were provided for, and I waited for 7 years. I would have waited a lifetime. I knew with absolute certainty that you would eventually understand what I always had. You were never built for a small existence, or for small men. You attempting to be ordinary was like trying to capture a hurricane inside a teacup." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "But this is the part I never shared. About 2 years in, I began to have doubts. I wondered if I was mistaken, if perhaps you were genuinely content with Marcus, if maybe it was time for me to finally release you." Elena's breath hitched in her throat. "What stopped you?" "I saw you in a supermarket in your neighborhood." He recounted the scene with the precision of an analyst. Her, standing in an aisle, performing normalcy. The weariness she carried wasn't physical. It was the weight of a life that didn't fit, slowly crushing her spirit. Marcus stood beside her like an apparition, absorbed in his phone, a perfect metaphor for their profound disconnection. Roman described watching her make 3 distinct efforts to connect with him, each one failing to earn so much as a glance. His assessment in that instant, was stark and clear. She wasn't merely unhappy, she was in hiding, and every sanctuary eventually is breached. The memory rushed back to Elena, a ghost of that afternoon. She'd been trying to plan a perfect meal, to play the role of a perfect wife, and he had made her feel completely unseen, another prop in his life. "You witnessed that and you did nothing?" she asked. "What could I have said? Your husband is a fool, return to me." You would have dismissed it as just another strategic move. The understanding, Elena, had to be your own. Roman raised her hand to his lips. But watching you take 5 years to realize that mistake was the single most exquisite torture of my life. Then why tell me this now? Because there is a distinction you need to grasp. The patience I gave you, the empathy, the waiting, that is an anomaly in my world. In that world, people are either assets or liabilities. They have a function or they are irrelevant. They are either leverage or they are neutralized. Roman's gaze locked with hers. But you, Elena, you were never an asset. You were always a person, a beautiful catastrophe, impossibly stubborn, a genius, and utterly fractured. And I was drawn to every piece of you, even the shards that made you run. Tears traced paths on Elena's face, a stark violation of the restaurant's quiet elegance. "That's what separates you from Marcus," she whispered. "He valued what I offered. You valued who I was." "Precisely. And you must never forget that. Power is a gilded cage, and control is a slow, sweet poison. The moment you see people as pawns, you forfeit the very soul that makes power worth having." Roman gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "Stay human, Elena. Stay beautifully complex. Do not let this world grind you into something simple." At that moment, the waiter appeared, an awkward specter in a moment of profound gravity, forcing them to retreat into themselves. They ordered dessert, shifting the conversation to the foundation, Roman's vast operation, and the tragic comedy of Victor's love life. When they departed, Elena felt centered once more, anchored in her own skin. 2 months after the gala, lost in budget reports, Elena's assistant interrupted the quiet. "Someone is here for you," Maria said. "No appointment, but she insists it's personal. Her name is Victoria Ashford." Elena's pen froze mid-stroke. She had not laid eyes on Victoria since the gala's wreckage, thinking of her only as a fragment of the disaster with Marcus. For Victoria to manifest here, unbidden, was a seismic tremor in her carefully rebuilt world. Let her in. Victoria entered, not in a designer creation, but in a tailored suit that made her appear both older and achingly young. She lingered awkwardly until Elena gestured to a chair. "Thank you for seeing me," Victoria started, her voice thick with a nervousness you could almost touch. "I find myself wondering why you're here. To be honest, I am not entirely certain myself." Victoria's hands were knotted in her lap. "I just keep hearing that night, your words, about being collateral damage. You were right. I was. Marcus used me for what I symbolized, not for who I was, in the exact same way he used you. The only distinction is that I was blind to it until you forced me to see." Victoria's voice was a whisper, but it held a core of tempered steel. "After the gala, after my father severed ties, Marcus completely unraveled. Ceaseless calls appearing at my home, desperately trying to argue that we could salvage it. He couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't rescue him, and did you?" "No, because I finally understood what you must have known for years. He never wanted me. He wanted my father's wealth and his influence. The instant those vanished, I became as expendable as you were." Victoria met Elena's gaze unblinking. I am not here to absolve him. I am here to atone for my role in your suffering, however unwitting. Elena tried to name the feeling inside her, a cocktail of ancient rage and a profound wave of grim validation. You owed me nothing, Elena countered. You were not even aware of my existence. Marcus guaranteed that. I should have been more inquisitive. I should have questioned why a man like Marcus would accept a divorce settlement that was so clearly a catastrophic strategic blunder. All the signs were present. Victoria dismissed it. But I chose to embrace his narrative. He was a means to my own ends, in a way I now find shameful. We were simply using one another, and neither of us had the integrity to name it. So what became of him? The last I heard, he accepted a position at some second-tier firm, a drastic reduction in salary with absolutely no path for advancement. He left the city. Victoria's expression was a perfect mask. He attempted contact a few times, always fixated on reclaiming what he'd lost, never on understanding why. I eventually blocked his number. Elena recalled Marcus's text from the night of the gala, the only authentic thing he had ever sent her. It was perhaps his one moment of clarity before his entire loathsome persona rebooted. I am sorry to hear that, Elena said, and to her surprise, she meant it. Are you? It would be logical to find some satisfaction in his ruin. I thought I would as well. It seems revenge is not the grand catharsis it's made out to be. Elena adjusted her position. Victoria, allow me to ask you something. That evening, when you discovered my identity, what did you feel first? That Marcus had betrayed you, or that your grand design had just imploded? Victoria considered it with brutal honesty. Both, I suppose. But predominantly the latter, which is a rather damning reflection on me. She paused, but that is partially why I am here, watching you that night, witnessing the life you had constructed, deliberately, with your own power, doing meaningful work. I saw that my entire strategy mirrored his, all illusion and access, with no real substance, all tapestry, no soul. And now you wish to change. I wish to try. Which is why. Victoria inhaled deeply. I am here. I am aware the foundation is recruiting a development director for fundraising. I have no nonprofit experience, but I understand the social machinery, how to manage monumental egos, and how to transmute money into influence. I want to apply those talents to something that matters, not merely to burnish my father's legacy. Elena was transparently stunned. You want to work for me. I realize it is an improbable request. I know I'm the last person you would ever want in your orbit, but I am asking because I believe I could be a formidable asset, and because I must prove to myself I can be more than an ornament. Victoria's voice gained strength. I'm not asking for charity. I will submit the entire formal interview process. I will provide my references and adhere to every protocol. I am simply asking for an opportunity. Elena looked at the woman before her, the one Marcus had chosen as her replacement, who was just as much a piece in his game as she had been. She could sense the desperate yearning beneath Victoria's polished proposal, a hunger to be of use. She could also see the profound risk. Victoria's presence would be a living monument to Marcus, to that entire nightmarish period of her life. She would be working alongside a witness to her nadir, even if Victoria was unaware of it. But it would also be an act of giving someone the very same chance she had received, to become more than the role she was cast in. Tell me the true reason, Elena pressed, not the rehearsed speech. A few of Victoria's defenses crumbled. because I am weary of being Richard Ashford's daughter, because every man I meet sees a net worth instead of a human being, because I watched you command that room, not with your husband's capital, but with this profound, inviolable sense of your own spirit, and I realized I have never known that feeling." Her eyes locked with Elena's. "Because I am 28 years old, and the only thing I have ever truly built is an improved public relations narrative for my father, and I am terrified that if I do not alter my path now, I will awaken at 40 and discover I never became a real person." That raw vulnerability was a tactical detonation. Elena recognized the feeling. She had inhabited that very same dread at 21, before Roman, before she learned that true power was born from the fear of being consumed by the expectations of others. "I will consider it," Elena said, "but let us be perfectly clear. If you work here, you will work. Real hours, tangible results, and genuine consequences. This is not a venue to role-play as a philanthropist while your trust fund covers your expenses. We are here to serve children with nothing, and that mission demands everything from us. Understood. And Marcus, your presence here means he is irrevocably gone from your life. I will not have his shadow fall anywhere near my organization. He is." Victoria's tone was forged from iron. "Completely. Any residual fantasy of a bond between us is dead. It has been since I uncovered his true intentions for me." Elena's decision revealed the depth of her transformation in 2 months. "Send your resume to my assistant. I will review it, and then we will schedule a formal interview. I promise you nothing more than a fair consideration." The wave of relief that washed over Victoria was almost a visible thing. "Thank you. I understand what it costs you to even permit me in this room." Long after Victoria departed, Elena sat in her silent office, contemplating second chances and the fine meridian between vengeance and maturity. She could have simply refused Victoria, indulging in the small, cruel power of extinguishing someone's desperate hope. To deny her would have been a maneuver from Marcus's own playbook, a surrender to the embittered person her trauma had shaped. Offering Victoria a chance was an act of becoming the woman Elena chose to be, one who perceived the intricate architecture of people, their capacity for reconstruction, and knew that authentic power elevates others. It does not crush them. She called Roman. "Victoria Ashford requested a job," she said when he picked up. "That is a fascinating turn of events." "And what was your answer?" "That I was considering her proposal." A weighty silence filled the line. "Are you certain?" "That introduces a significant new variable. Every variable is complex, but I believe her sincerity. And I believe she needs this just as I needed the foundation, an opportunity to build a life different from the one she was given." Elena paused, then delivered the final piece. "And if I can work alongside her, forge this arrangement, and maintain a strictly professional boundary without our history poisoning it, then I am truly free of Marcus. Genuinely, not just for appearances." Roman's voice returned, resonating with deep approval. "Now that is a power move. High risk, certainly, but a definitive power move. What you are building is real, Elena. It is more than a foundation. It is an entirely new doctrine on the nature of power. I am trying to. Some days the effort is less of a burden than others. That is the only path forward. One decision at a time, choosing growth over grievance." Roman paused. "Be home soon tonight. There is a place I want to show you." "Where are you taking me?" he heard her ask. "It's a secret." He brought her to the small apartment that held the first chapter of their story, long before the sprawling empire and the penthouse suite. It was a time capsule, perfectly preserved. Why? She breathed, standing in a room that felt like a phantom limb. He needed a tether, he confessed, to the moment they began, before the influence, the agony, and 7 years of silence. He looked out at a skyline that paled in comparison to their current view. I built it all for us, not to stand between us. Elena moved through the cramped spaces, her fingers tracing the ghosts of their past. The kitchen where they made meals from necessity. The bathroom where he taught her to clean a wound on his lip, a wound he'd gotten for her. The bedroom where they would trace constellations on the ceiling until sunrise, whispering impossible dreams. We were happy then, her voice a fragile thing. We were, he agreed, because we were simple. Not our lives, but us. Just two souls weaving one future from nothing. He stood beside her. I need that again. Not the hardship, but the partnership. The feeling of building together instead of you living in my shadow. Me too. So let's create it, he urged. Not as a rebuttal to Marcus, not for retribution, and not to reclaim what was lost. Let's build on what we have right now. Our foundation, our shared life, our horizon. He turned her to face him. I love you, Elena. I loved you as Lara Quinn. I loved you through 7 years of watching you become someone else. I love you now as you find your way back to yourself. But I have to ask, are you here because you choose to be, or because Marcus burned all your other bridges? The question was both a lifeline and a blade. Elena saw their entire history flicker in his eyes. The schism, the gala, the foundation, the slow, painful work of becoming a woman she could respect. Both, she admitted, her honesty stark. Marcus lit the fuse. But Roman, I didn't return to you for shelter. I returned because I finally understood what I fled from for 7 years. Power isn't the poison, its misuse is. Hiding who you are doesn't protect you, it diminishes you. And I'm choosing to be immense now and difficult and powerful in a way that matters. I want to create things that endure and mend those who are broken. And I want to stand with you as your equal, not your ornament. Elena took his hands. I am here by choice. Not because I need a hero, but because I want a partner for every part of this life. A profound peace finally settled over Elena in Roman's world, a security she hadn't known for an eternity. 6 months after the gala, a showcase featuring 300 artists became a staggering success. The event generated $2 million, capturing the media's full attention while she directed the entire orchestra from behind the curtain. Victoria, her new second-in-command, proved to be an absolute shark in a business setting. Their connection was one of professional synergy, forged from a common objective, not a casual friendship. Victoria confirmed they had exceeded their fundraising target by 40%. Elena simply approved an expansion, her focus entirely on the outcome, not the expenditure. When word of Marcus's next step reached her, Elena felt an authentic wish for him to find his footing. She saw that the narrative of her own past had been entirely redrafted. Anger, she murmured to herself, is such a poor use of one's fire. Her focus was now on creation, and the showcase was her testament. Her sense of self was now being forged in the crucible of meaningful work. No longer defined by old injuries, Roman would appear by her side, his arm a quiet gesture of support, his eyes reflecting his pride in her newfound mastery. Later, she gazed out at the city, the landscape of her own private war. Roman's own relentless ambition had never once faltered. The news of Marcus's engagement registered with a surprising, hard-earned emotional quiet. Elena coolly voiced a hope that he might truly alter his fundamental nature, citing her own transformation as evidence of what was achievable. A call from Roman pulled her from her reverie, and she turned back to him and to the world she had run from for 7 years. The specters of who she once was, the fearful Quinn, the desperate Elena of 7 years prior, had finally been laid to rest. The woman who remained was forged from the ashes of her suffering and the strength of her survival. In owning every broken part of herself, she found a silent victory. A confession of love left her lips, a mere breath of sound, and the world Roman was lost and simply ceased to exist as his gaze, absolute and total, met hers. Roman made his acceptance of every facet of her plain, recasting her flight as a vital part of her evolution. He spoke of growth, not of flawlessness. His words were a balm, a direct antidote to the 7 years she had feigned perfection for Marcus, an act that ended with his contempt for the real woman beneath the facade. Now, in this life, she possessed both a companion and a mission. She viewed Marcus's malevolence in a new way, as the unintentional spark that ignited her reinvention. Her own cruel odyssey had taught her to see power as an instrument for good, an idea she knew was utterly foreign to a man like Marcus. That singular insight, which had cost Elena 7 brutal years to acquire, was a lesson Victoria was now learning herself. Elena no longer pretended or concealed. She simply was, one soul among millions. She moved between the force she was becoming and the quiet person she once was, discovering a flawless equilibrium between command and surrender. In that space, she found tranquility. Elena had finally grasped that the objective was never to avoid breaking, but to become whole. The 7 years of methodical deconstruction were definitively past. Her future was a pilgrimage toward wholeness, toward embracing the very essence Marcus had sought to annihilate. The performance was over. The time for concealment had passed. Her new trajectory was aimed at creation, at leveraging her position to improve the lives of others. The ultimate triumph was not in settling scores, but in the restoration of her own soul. A deep serenity enveloped her, a feeling she now associated with the unwavering, grounding presence of her partner, Roman. Her ambition had been to cultivate fortitude, not to live a life insulated from turmoil. Marcus's calculated scheme to demolish her spirit had failed to even scratch her inner strength. She now experienced true repose beside Roman, the man who proved that power and love could be intertwined, and that vulnerability was not a weakness. Her future was the foundation itself, and her pact with Victoria, 2 women shaped by the fire of one man's flawed judgment. With Roman, she was a true co-creator. Tonight she was simply at rest, her thoughts finally free from the noise. The persona of Quinn had vanished. The story of the real Elena Vulov had only just begun.